Open Book The Possessed Bride by Frank Parwaz. Chapter 1. The train to Punjab. The train screeched as it pulled away from Lahore Junction, iron wheels grinding against the tracks with a rhythm that sounded almost alive. The fog of a Punjabi winter clung thickly to the windows, smudging the lanterns on the platform into pale golden orbs. Vendors shouted into the mist as though their voices could cut it: hot chai, egg and pan-fried layered flatbread, cigarettes, matches. The words blended into a chorus of hunger, survival, and routine. Omar pressed his forehead against the cold glass, watching the blurred shapes slip away. Men with shawls wrapped tightly across their chests, children chasing one another barefoot, women balancing bundles on their heads like crowns, all of it dissolved as the train picked up speed. He had traveled between Lahore and Faisalabad before, but this journey stretched farther, deeper into Punjab. To a town he had only heard of in stories, to a mansion older than partition itself, to a bride he barely knew. He told himself he should feel joy, or at least nervous anticipation. But his stomach had been twisted since dawn. Maybe it was the fog, maybe the way the platform fell eerily silent once the train departed. Maybe it was the weight of change pressing against his chest. Across from him, a man shifted in his seat, adjusting the folds of his woolen shawl. "Son," he said with a knowing smile, "you look as though you're heading to a funeral, not a wedding." It was Uncle Tariq, not a relative by blood, but one of those family friends so deeply rooted in memory that he might as well have been. Tariq was known for his endless reservoir of stories, some true, some exaggerated, all delivered with the flair of a man who had spent decades talking over cups of chai. "I'm only tired," Omar replied. "It's been a long week." Tariq chuckled. "Every groom says the same. But tiredness passes. What you should worry about are the things that don't pass so easily." Omar frowned. "What things?" Tariq's eyes shifted toward the window. Beyond the glass, the fog had swallowed everything: fields, trees, even the stars. The train seemed to cut through a world that was more void than landscape. He lowered his voice. "Weddings are joyous," Tariq said. "But joy attracts envy. And envy attracts them." Omar's skin prickled. "Them? The jinn." The word slipped into the carriage like a draft of cold air. Omar exhaled sharply, trying to laugh. He had grown up with such tales, whispered during blackouts, traded between cousins on rooftops, invoked by mothers to keep children from wandering at night. But here, on this train bound for his marriage, the words sounded heavier. "You don't believe in that, Uncle," Omar said, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. "I believe enough to be careful," Tariq replied. He leaned closer, his beard brushing against his shawl. "Have you heard the story of the bride who laughed too loudly on her wedding night?" Omar shook his head. "They said her laughter wasn't hers. It belonged to the jinn who had followed her since childhood. That night, her husband was found cold, his eyes open, his mouth frozen mid-scream. The elders knew what it was. She had been claimed." Omar shifted uneasily. "You're trying to scare me." "I'm reminding you," Tariq corrected. "Every mansion has its ghosts. Some are memories. Some are hungrier." The train lurched, crossing a bridge with a hollow metallic roar. Omar turned to the window again, eager to break the weight of Tariq's words. And that's when he saw it. A black cat. It sat perfectly still on the embankment, its silhouette etched against the fog. Its fur was slick with dew, but it did not shiver. Its tail curled around its paws with the patience of something eternal. And its eyes, they caught the glow of the train's lamps, burning like twin embers. For a moment, Omar thought the cat was watching not the train, but him. The car jolted, rattling with speed. When Omar blinked, the cat was still there, unflinching. The train thundered past, yet the animal did not move. Only when the fog thickened, swallowing the view, did the vision vanish. He leaned back, unsettled. Tariq had already closed his eyes, muttering Subhanallah, "Glory be to God," under his breath as if the sight had not gone unnoticed. The rhythm of the train returned, loud and relentless, carrying them deeper into the night. The carriage had grown quiet. Most passengers were wrapped in quilts, faces tucked away, seeking warmth against the cold draft seeping in from the doors. But Omar remained awake. It was then he noticed the conductor making his rounds. The man moved slowly, stamping tickets with a mechanical rhythm. He paused at a corner seat where a bulky figure sat wrapped head to toe in a coarse blanket. Only the man's shoes peeked from beneath the folds. "Ticket?" the conductor asked. The figure tilted its head but said nothing. "Ticket?" the conductor repeated, irritation creeping into his tone. Silence. Finally, the figure's voice emerged, low, gravelly, not quite human. "What is a ticket?" The conductor recoiled, muttered a curse, and hurried past. Omar glanced at Tariq, but the old man's eyes remained shut, as though he had heard nothing. When Omar looked back, the blanket seat was empty. That night, when the train screeched to a sudden halt near a fog-choked crossing, the passengers awoke in panic. Some swore they saw white-shrouded bodies lying across the tracks, stretching endlessly into the mist. The driver and guard argued in the cold air, their voices trembling. By the time the fog cleared, the tracks were bare. No bodies. No footprints. Nothing. But the whisper had already begun. It curled along the walls of the carriage, threaded between sleeping passengers, slipped under Omar's skin. "She is already mine." Omar's breath caught. He turned, but Tariq was still asleep, and no one else stirred. The words faded, but the chill remained. And somewhere in the darkness outside, a cat's eyes burned like coals. Chapter 1, The Train to Punjab, Part 2, the train jolted forward again, its whistle shrill in the mist, and the passengers slowly resettled. A boy wrapped in a thin blanket whimpered until his mother drew him into her lap, murmuring a prayer. Someone at the far end of the carriage lit a cigarette, the acrid smoke curling through the air, sharp against the faint sweetness of spilled chai. Omar stayed awake, his ears straining. His heart hadn't settled since the whisper. He told himself it was only the mind playing tricks, a dream snatched from the fog. But the more he tried to reason, the more the air seemed too heavy for logic. Two men across the aisle shuffled a deck of greasy cards between them, slapping them down on the little wooden table that shook with the train's rhythm. Their game, however, kept being interrupted by muttered stories. Omar caught fragments. "Beggar in Rahim Yar Khan, money gone, all gone overnight, eyes like coal." The older of the two men leaned back, lowering his voice but not enough to keep it from carrying. "I tell you, bro, these beggars, they look like beggars but they're not beggars. They're jinn. You hand them a coin, and by next morning your whole purse will be empty." One man gave his watch for blessing, next day the watch was gone, and so was his son. The other man spat to the side. "Superstition. Superstition. You think the whole community lies? Ask anyone. Jinn don't need your permission to take what they like. They slip into your house, into your body, into your marriage bed." Omar tore his gaze away, but the words clung. He thought of Tariq's warning, of the black cat's burning eyes. "Boys," Tariq's voice startled him. The old man had opened his eyes without Omar noticing. His smile was wry. "Play your cards and stop scaring the groom." Both men chuckled, half apologetic, half defiant. But Omar's ears still burned with the unfinished sentence, "into your marriage bed." A vendor came through the carriage then, balancing a kettle in one hand and a basket of snacks in the other. "Hot chai. Hot chai." Steam rose as he poured into chipped cups, and Omar accepted one, grateful for the warmth. The tea was strong, thick with milk and sugar, cardamom biting through. It grounded him for a moment, reminded him of mornings at home. But then a new story began, this time from a boy not much older than Omar himself. He sat with a small group, perhaps students, his voice eager with the thrill of telling a tale. "My cousin saw it with his own eyes," he said. "A man in a blanket, sitting alone on the tracks." The driver braked, horn screaming, but the train went right through him. Poof! Gone. They searched the ground, nothing. Not even a footprint. Only the blanket left behind, folded neat. His friends shivered and laughed nervously, urging him to go on. "They say he waits at crossings. If you see him, you don't reach home. Ever." The boys fell into uneasy silence. The cards stopped slapping. Even the cigarette smoke seemed to thicken. Omar sipped his tea, but it tasted bitter now. As the hours passed, sleep claimed most of the passengers. The carriage filled with the soft sound of snores, the occasional cough, the rustle of quilts shifting. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, sometimes parting to reveal the pale outlines of trees, skeletal branches scratching at the mist. Omar tried to rest, but his thoughts spun. He imagined Layla's face, not clearly, for he had seen her only once, from a distance, during the formal visit when the marriage was arranged. She had been veiled, her features half hidden, her eyes lowered. He remembered only the faint shimmer of jewelry and the quiet grace of her posture. What if she didn't want him? What if she was already changed, as Tariq implied? The idea made his chest tighten. He wanted to believe in a normal life, a wife, a home, laughter, but the stories pressed in too hard. He pulled his shawl tighter and whispered a dua, prayer, under his breath, but the words felt fragile. The train slowed again near a crossing. Omar peeked through the fogged window and felt his blood run cold. Figures. At least a dozen, maybe more, lying across the tracks in white shrouds. They stretched into the mist, unmoving. The driver's whistle shrieked, brakes screeching until sparks spat from the wheels. Passengers lurched forward, startled awake, cries breaking through the carriage. "Oh God!" someone screamed. Bodies. But when the train finally stopped, the tracks ahead were empty. The guard swore he'd seen them. The driver wiped sweat from his brow with trembling hands. But there was nothing. No blood, no cloth, no footprints in the frost. The passengers muttered feverishly, prayers spilling from dry lips. Tariq rubbed his beard, eyes grave but unreadable. Omar stared into the fog until his vision swam. He thought he saw movement near the tree line, a black shape low to the ground, tail curled around its paws. The cat again. Its eyes glowed, steady, watching. Then the fog swallowed it whole. The train crept forward once more, cautious, as though afraid of what else the night might hold. The passengers huddled into their blankets, too shaken for further talk. Only the wheels spoke now, clattering like distant drums. Omar tried to close his eyes, but the whisper came again. Not outside this time, inside, sliding directly into his mind. "She is already mine." His eyes flew open. Tariq was asleep. The card players were asleep. The students were asleep. No lips had moved. Yet the words curled against his ears like smoke. He pressed his palms together, fingers trembling. The chai in his stomach curdled into lead. He wanted to tell himself it was imagination, a trick of fatigue. But then he felt it, a cold breath against the side of his neck. He jerked around. No one was there. Chapter 1, The Train to Punjab, Part 3. Omar didn't sleep after that. Even with the carriage quiet, the rattle of the train steady, and Tariq snoring softly across from him, he could not surrender to rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the whisper again, curling like smoke just under his skin. "She is already mine." He tried to reason with himself. Fatigue. Nerves. A long day and a longer journey ahead. But the words felt too real, as though they had been spoken by a mouth close enough for him to feel its breath. The night dragged. The train pressed on through fog and darkness, cutting across a Punjab landscape invisible behind the mist. Once or twice, the fog parted, revealing outlines of sleeping villages, mud brick houses clustered around dim lanterns, fields ghostly with frost. Dogs barked as the train roared past, their voices thin and distant, as though carried from another world. At one point, a group of women began singing softly in the next carriage, a folk tune Omar recognized from wedding rituals. Their voices were lilting, comforting, almost enough to make him smile. But then, one by one, their notes fell out of harmony, until a single voice remained, low, guttural, dragging the melody into something unearthly. The sound cut off abruptly. Silence flooded the train. Omar's skin crawled. By dawn, the passengers stirred back to life. Vendors boarded at small stops, calling out for tea, boiled eggs, samosas. The smell of frying oil and spices filled the carriage, mingling with the metallic tang of the rails. People yawned, stretched, rubbed frost from the windows. But Omar felt no relief. His eyes burned with sleeplessness, his mind replaying the cat's stare, the blanket man, the whisper. He tried to convince himself it was just stories, woven too tightly together. But even the most ordinary sounds, the slosh of chai, the laughter of a boy biting into a paratha, seemed tinged with something else. Tariq leaned forward, sipping tea from a chipped cup. His expression was unreadable. "You didn't rest." "No," Omar admitted. Tariq studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "Sometimes, when the jinn take interest, they don't wait until the house. They ride the rails with you." Omar shivered. "Why me?" Tariq shrugged. "Why anyone? Maybe because you are young. Maybe because you carry hope. Maybe because you are about to enter a new life, and something old wants to stop you." The words offered no comfort. The train slowed again, this time near a lonely station no bigger than a shack. A handful of villagers stood waiting, their shawls pulled tight, their faces pale in the fog. They climbed aboard silently, carrying bundles, avoiding the eyes of other passengers. Omar noticed one old woman glance at him, then quickly lower her gaze. Something about her expression, fear, pity, recognition, lodged in his chest. He turned back to the window. The cat was there again. It sat on the edge of the platform, licking its paw, utterly unbothered by the noise and the cold. Its eyes lifted, and for the third time, Omar felt their weight lock onto him. Not on the train, not on the dozens of other passengers, but directly on him. The train jerked forward. The cat did not move until the last possible second, when the fog rose like a curtain and swallowed it whole. The rest of the journey blurred. Villages passed, indistinct. The carriage filled with chatter, with the shuffle of luggage, with vendors insisting their boiled eggs were the freshest. But Omar felt removed, watching it all from a distance. Each time he blinked, he saw those eyes. Each time he swallowed, he heard the whisper. His stomach ached with hunger, but the thought of food turned sour in his throat. When at last the driver shouted the name of his stop, Omar gathered his bag with numb fingers. The train slowed, brakes squealing, and the passengers pressed toward the doors. Tariq clapped his shoulder. "Remember what I told you," he said. "Joy attracts envy. Be careful, son. A mansion can hold many things, but not all of them belong to the living." Omar forced a smile, though his chest felt hollow. He stepped off the carriage into the fog. The air was colder here, damp and heavy. The platform was nearly deserted, just a single lantern flickering weakly, a stray dog sniffing at shadows, the distant sound of a rooster announcing morning to no one in particular. And then, the soft scrape of claws on stone. He turned sharply. There, at the far end of the platform, the black cat sat once more, tail curled neatly, eyes burning like embers. This time, it opened its mouth. The sound that emerged was not a meow. It was a whisper carried on the morning air, the same voice that had haunted Omar's night on the train. "She is already mine." Omar staggered back, breath caught in his throat. A vendor bumped into him, muttering an apology, and when Omar looked again, the platform was empty. Only fog remained. He clutched his bag tighter, pulse racing. Somewhere ahead, beyond the station, beyond the fields and mist, a mansion waited. Inside it, a bride. His bride. He forced himself to take the first step forward. The cat's voice echoed in his skull. Already mine. Sparkle's end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, The Mansion, Part 1. The ox cart that carried Omar from the station creaked under its own weight, its wooden wheels complaining at every stone on the road. The fog thinned as dawn lifted, but the air still clung with dampness, carrying the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. Villages passed slowly, children with sleep-stiff hair waving from doorways, women sweeping courtyards, men crouched on their haunches sipping chai in chipped enamel cups. Everywhere, people glanced at Omar with curiosity. A stranger, clearly from the city, carrying a leather bag and a groom's nervous posture. He shifted in his seat, tugging at his shawl, wishing he could melt into anonymity. The field stretched wide, mustard flowers like tiny suns against the mist, sugarcane rustling in the cold breeze. But even the beauty felt muted, as if the land itself held its breath. Tariq's words clung like cobwebs, joy attracts envy. Some mansion ghosts are hungry. At last, the mansion rose from the horizon. It was larger than Omar expected, its walls a mixture of grandeur and erosion. The sandstone facade bore intricate carvings of flowers and calligraphy, but time had chewed the edges, leaving cracks like veins across the surface. Wooden balconies jutted above the courtyard, their lattice screens dark with age. At one corner, a tower leaned ever so slightly, as if bending under the burden of years. The gates creaked open as the cart approached. Servants rushed forward, their breaths fogging in the morning chill. Omar stepped down, his shoes crunching on the gravel path, his chest tightening as though the mansion itself exhaled upon him. Inside, the air was cooler, carrying the scent of damp stone and incense burned too often to mask something older. The courtyard opened wide, its center dominated by a dry fountain, its marble basin cracked. A peepal tree grew from one side, its roots gripping the wall like skeletal hands. Omar, a woman's voice greeted warmly. A tall figure emerged from the inner hall, his aunt, draped in a deep maroon shawl, silver bangles clinking on her wrist. Her smile was genuine, but her eyes carried a flicker of unease, as if studying him for cracks she couldn't name. "Welcome to your new home." Omar bowed slightly. "Thanks, Aunt." Servants bustled to carry his bag, one of them stealing a quick glance toward the north wing of the mansion before averting his eyes. Omar followed the glance. A long corridor stretched there, its end swallowed in shadow. One door was sealed with a thick chain and a padlock dulled by rust. Even from this distance, it seemed to hum with silence. He turned back quickly, unsettled. Inside the guest quarters, the rooms were furnished in heavy teak, polished but scarred by time. Carpets muffled his steps, their patterns faded but still intricate. A large mirror hung above a chest of drawers. Omar set down his bag and froze. For the briefest moment, the reflection didn't match. His body moved faster than the glass, as though the image lagged by a heartbeat. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, and the mirror showed nothing unusual. He muttered a prayer under his breath. Breakfast was served in the courtyard, parathas steaming with ghee, a pot of chai, bowls of curd. A handful of relatives sat around the table, cousins he vaguely remembered, uncles whose faces carried stories of hard winters and harder politics. They welcomed him with cheer, but underneath the surface lay currents he couldn't quite read. One cousin leaned toward another, whispering until their laughter broke too quickly. A servant carried a tray past Omar but stumbled, spilling tea dangerously close to his lap. The servant's hands shook as he muttered an apology, his eyes darting, not at Omar, but toward the chained door in the north wing. Omar ate slowly, each bite tasting like ash. Later, he walked the corridors, tracing the mansion's bones. Sunlight cut through the lattice screens, spilling patterns of stars onto the stone floors. Portraits lined the walls, ancestors in turbans and jewels, women veiled but painted with an intensity that felt almost alive. Dust motes floated thick, dancing in the beams of light like tiny souls. At one corner, he heard giggles, high, childish, fleeting. He turned quickly. The corridor was empty. Only the peepal tree's shadow stretched across the floor. He shook his head. Imagination. Fatigue. But when he turned again, the mirror at the corridor's end rippled faintly, as if stirred by water. Chapter 2, The Mansion, Part 2, The corridors of the mansion seemed endless. Each turn revealed another archway, another alcove, another wall etched with faded calligraphy. Omar trailed his hand along the cool plaster, its surface uneven, chipped by decades of monsoon and neglect. Every few steps, a draft curled against his skin, cold and inexplicable, as if the mansion breathed through cracks in its bones. From one of the side halls came the sound of clattering dishes. Omar followed it, drawn more by unease than curiosity. In the kitchen, a servant boy scrubbed at a pot with frantic energy, his small hands raw and red. A cook stood over the hearth, stirring lentils with a spoon as long as a sword. Both froze when Omar entered. "Salam," Omar offered. The cook returned the greeting, but the boy dropped the pot with a loud clang. His eyes widened as though Omar had walked in carrying fire. "Careful," the cook hissed, cuffing the boy lightly. "Go fetch wood." The boy fled, his bare feet slapping against the stone floor. Omar frowned. "Did I frighten him?" The cook's smile was brittle. "Children. They make stories out of shadows." But Omar caught it, the way the cook's gaze flicked toward the northern wing before he quickly bent back over the lentils. That afternoon, the relatives gathered in the courtyard again. The sun filtered weakly through the fog, warming the stones but never lifting the chill entirely. Omar sat near the fountain, pretending to listen to an uncle's long tale about land disputes, when he caught fragments of conversation drifting from a pair of ants. "The last bride, you remember?" "Bah, Chup, don't speak of it." "But he should know." "This house," a sharp glance silenced the speaker. Both women adjusted their shawls, eyes darting toward Omar before turning away. Omar's stomach tightened. He wanted to ask, to demand clarity, but the weight of their silence pressed him down. Instead, he sipped his tea and let the words fester. Later, when he returned to his room, the mirror above the drawers greeted him once again. He avoided it, undressing quickly and lying down on the charpoy. Sleep took him in jagged bursts. In one dream, he walked the mansion's corridors, his footsteps echoing. The locked door loomed at the end of the north wing, its chain rattling softly as if stirred by breath from within. A whisper seeped through the wood, low and intimate. "Already mine." He jolted awake, sweat cooling against his skin. The mirror opposite him shimmered faintly, as though someone had passed before it. In the evening, his aunt led him through the mansion's inner courtyard, pointing out the rooms that would soon be his to share with his bride. The walls here were painted with floral motifs, their colors faded but still vibrant in places, a reminder of the mansion's once glorious past. "This house has seen many weddings," she said, her voice heavy with memory. "Some joyous. Some, less so." Her pause stretched long enough for Omar to notice, but before he could ask, a servant arrived with a tray of sweet milk. Aunt smiled thinly. "You must rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day." That night, unable to sleep, Omar wandered again. The mansion creaked and groaned like an old animal, its sounds amplified by the stillness. Somewhere, a pigeon cooed from the rafters. Somewhere else, a door slammed though no wind blew. Drawn by a force he could neither resist nor explain, he walked toward the north wing. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with the smell of damp and something sharper, sulfur, faint but distinct. The locked door stood silent, its chain catching the moonlight. Omar reached out, his fingers brushing the iron links. They were colder than stone. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard movement inside. A faint rustle, like fabric dragged across the floor. Then, a knock. Soft, deliberate. From the other side. Omar stumbled back, his breath freezing in his chest. When he looked again, the corridor was empty. The door was still. But the chain trembled as though it had just been touched. Chapter 2, The Mansion, Part 3, The following morning broke cold and grey. Mist clung to the courtyard, swallowing the fountain in a veil of white. Omar rose reluctantly, his sleep fractured by half-dreams of rattling chains and whispers curling under locked doors. He washed at the basin, the water so icy it numbed his hands. When he lifted his head, the mirror above the basin caught his eye. His reflection stood as expected, but for an instant, its lips moved though he had said nothing. He stepped back sharply, water dripping from his fingers. The mirror showed only him, wide-eyed, breathing fast. He muttered Bismillah, in the name of God, and left the room. Preparations filled the mansion. Women bustled with trays of sweets, their anklets chiming against the stone floors. Men argued over supplies, sacks of rice, drums of oil, crates of fruit. The air smelled of frying pakoras and incense, sweet and heavy. Yet beneath the noise, a current of unease flowed. Whenever Omar entered a room, conversations paused just a little too late. Eyes darted toward him, then away. He caught fragments, the last bride, the omen, the cat. Even laughter sounded brittle, as though it were only armor against something unseen. In the late afternoon, his aunt summoned him to the women's wing. He hesitated, propriety weighed heavily, but she insisted. It is only proper you meet her, even briefly. Tomorrow, the rituals begin. The inner chamber was dim, its windows covered with embroidered cloth. The air smelled of rosewater and henna, mingled with something sharper, metallic. Women sat on charpoys, gossiping in low voices that fell silent as Omar entered. And then he saw her. Layla. She sat near the far wall, her dupatta, traditional South Asian drape, drawn low across her face. The lamplight caught only fragments, the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the shimmer of bangles on her wrist. Her eyes remained lowered, her hands folded in her lap. Omar's heart thudded. He had expected shyness, but what radiated from her was something else. Stillness. An unnatural stillness, as if she were not sitting but waiting. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Before he could gather courage, his aunt touched his arm. Enough for now. The bride must rest. The women's gazes followed him out, unreadable, weighing him down with their silence. That evening, as dusk settled, Omar wandered again to the courtyard. Lamps flickered to life, their flames bending against an unseen draft. He sat near the fountain, listening to the rustle of the peepal tree. The wind carried children's laughter from the village beyond the walls, ordinary, human, grounding. For a moment, he let himself breathe. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement at the north wing. A figure stood near the chained door. Veiled, motionless. Layla, he called softly, unsure. The figure did not answer. It only tilted its head, as though studying him. When he stepped forward, heart hammering, the figure dissolved into shadow. The chain rattled once, then stilled. He returned to his quarters, his chest tight with dread. The mirror above the drawers greeted him once more, reflecting the dim lamplight. He forced himself to look. For the briefest heartbeat, the reflection was not his alone. Layla stood behind him in the glass, unveiled, eyes glowing faintly red, lips curved in a smile that did not belong to her. He spun around. The room was empty. Sparkles. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, The Wedding. The mansion awoke before the first call of far, early morning prayer. Somewhere in the women's wing, a dull drum beat softly, a steady rhythm like the first heartbeat of the day. It grew louder as the sky lightened, joined by clapping and laughter that spilled across the courtyard. By the time Omar stepped outside, the house was already alive. Servants hurried past with trays of marigolds, their petals bright as fire against the gray dawn. Boys climbed ladders, stringing fairy lights across carved balconies. Women in shawls leaned over railings, their voices weaving songs into the fog. The air shimmered with preparation. The smell of frying pakoras drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the sweetness of jalebis, syrup bubbling over brass pans. Incense smoked from clay pots placed at doorways, curling upward in thin white threads. It should have felt joyous. But as Omar sat on the fountain's edge, cup of tea cooling in his hands, unease gnawed at his chest. Every laugh seemed too sharp, every clap too hard, as though the household forced brightness into the day. Even the fairy lights flickered despite the steady hum of the generator. And each time Layla entered the courtyard, veiled and silent, the air shifted. Children stopped giggling. The song stumbled. A chill rode her steps like an unseen companion. By mid-morning, the Mendi began. The women gathered in a circle on the courtyard floor, their shawls spread wide, henna cones ready in their hands. Songs rose, old Punjabi folk melodies sung for generations of brides. The chorus of voices echoed off the stone walls, claps punctuating the rhythm. Layla sat in the center, her hands and feet bare, palms turned upward. A woman traced vines and flowers across her skin, the paste thick and fragrant. The scent of henna filled the air, earthy and sharp. Omar watched from behind the lattice screen, as tradition required. His breath caught when he heard the henna artist murmur, "It won't take. The skin is too cold." The words weren't meant for him, but they lodged deep. Layla sat motionless, eyes downcast. Only her bangles chimed faintly when her wrists shifted. The song continued, but Omar noticed the women avoided touching her too long, their smiles a little forced. On the other side of the screen, two cousins whispered. "Do you remember the last bride? Chup kar, don't speak." But she should have never entered, their voices cut off when another woman hushed them. Omar's skin prickled. In the men's wing, the air was different. Loud, boisterous. Cousins slapped cards onto wooden tables, their voices rising in jokes about cricket and politics. Hookah smoke drifted lazily through the room, mixing with the aroma of roasted meat. Omar was pulled into the circle, clapped on the back, teased about wedding night secrets. But his mind wandered. He kept staring at the walls where shadows swayed with the lamp glow. One shadow stretched longer than it should have, bending strangely, crouched on all fours. His breath caught, but when he blinked, it was gone. "Oi, Dulha. Your mind's already with the bride," a cousin teased. Laughter erupted. Omar forced a smile, his throat dry. By evening, the mansion transformed. Fairy lights blazed across the balconies, their glow trembling against the fog that rolled in thick from the fields. Strings of marigolds hung from every arch, their scent cloying. The courtyard filled with guests, their laughter loud, their clothes a riot of color, emerald sherwanis, gold thread saris, red dupattas, traditional South Asian drape, heavy with sequins. The bride was led out at last. Layla appeared beneath a canopy of shawls held by her cousins, her veil crimson and gold, embroidery shimmering in the lamps. Her wrists gleamed with bangles, her ankles chimed softly with each step. Guests murmured blessings, women ululated, the drum thundered. But as she crossed the courtyard, the fairy lights flickered. The air grew cold enough that Omar saw his breath. Children quieted. One little boy whimpered and hid his face in his mother's dupatta. Layla lowered herself onto the dais, her stillness almost regal. She did not look left or right, only folded her hands in her lap. The imam was called. The nikah began. Omar sat opposite, the Quran between them. His tongue felt thick as he repeated the vows. The imam's voice was steady, but his eyes lingered on Layla too long, as if reading something beneath her veil. When the final dua, prayer, was spoken, the courtyard erupted. Cheers, claps, laughter. Firecrackers snapped against the walls, sparks scattering into the fog. Relatives crowded Omar, hugging him, blessing him, pressing sweets into his hand. His face ached with forced smiles. Through it all, Layla sat motionless. Only once did she lift her head. For a heartbeat, Omar saw her eyes through the veil. They glimmered faintly red. Chapter 3, The Wedding Installment 2. The courtyard overflowed with food. Servants carried in brass trays so large 2 men were needed to hold each one. Steam rose into the cold night air, biryani jeweled with saffron, platters of seekh kebabs spitting juices, cauldrons of halim thick as clay, pyramids of samosas stacked beside bowls of chutney green as spring. Sweets glistened, gulab jamun soaking in syrup, laddus golden and crumbly, kheer topped with almonds and rose petals. The scent alone should have lifted Omar's spirit, but his appetite had long fled. He sat at the head table while cousins clapped him on the back, urging him to eat. Omar, at least take some biryani. A wedding night needs strength. Laughter erupted. A cousin he barely remembered piled rice onto Omar's plate, the grains steaming, the aroma rich. Omar forced a spoonful into his mouth. The taste was right, spiced, tender, perfect, but something lingered. A faint bitterness, metallic, like rust on his tongue. He swallowed quickly, pushing the plate aside. When he glanced down again, his stomach turned. The corner of the dish near Layla had darkened, the rice blackened, as though left to rot for days. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes. In an instant, it looked normal again. His cousin dug in happily, unaware. Omar's hands shook under the table. Children played near the fountain, chasing one another, their laughter piercing through the din of adults' chatter. Their joy rang clear until one little boy darted too close to the dais where Layla sat. He froze mid-step. His face crumpled, lips trembling before a wail tore from his throat. He bolted to his mother, burying his face in her shawl. She scooped him up, her expression tight, her eyes flashing toward Layla before she hurried away. "What do you mean?" Omar whispered. But her gaze slid to the chained north wing, lips tightening. She gave no answer. Servants circulated with trays of jalebi, syrup dripping down their wrists. One young girl carried a plate to the dais, offering Layla a coil of bright orange sweetness. For the first time that night, Layla lifted her hand. The bangles chimed softly. Her fingers brushed the jalebi. In an instant, the sugar blackened, crumbling to ash in the girl's palm. The child gasped, dropping the remains. They scattered across the carpet like burned paper. The girl fled into the crowd, eyes wide, her dupatta flapping behind her. Guests stirred uneasily. Whispers broke out. Some pretended not to see, raising their voices in cheer, clapping to the drum. Others crossed themselves, muttering supplication to God. Omar sat frozen, his throat dry, his gaze fixed on Layla. She had lowered her hand again, folding it neatly into her lap as if nothing had happened. Only her bangles swayed, chiming faintly in the heavy air. From the corner of the courtyard, a sound cut through the music. A low, guttural growl. Omar's heart seized. He turned his head slowly. The black cat sat beneath the peepal tree, its body dark as ink, its tail wrapped around its paws. Its eyes glowed ember red, unblinking, fixed directly on him. The drum pounded. Guests shouted, danced, clapped. But none of them seemed to see. Only Omar. His grip tightened on the chair, knuckles white. He wanted to rise, to chase the beast, to cry out, but his body was heavy, pinned by its gaze. Then, as if the fog itself swallowed it, the cat vanished. The music surged louder, swallowing the moment whole. By the time the feast wound down, the courtyard was a swirl of noise and color again. Guests danced, fireworks cracked above the mansion walls, sparks scattering across the mist. Omar moved among them, smiling faintly, answering blessings, tasting nothing. But all the while, the weight of Layla's presence pressed against him. Still. Silent. Watching. Chapter 3, The Wedding Installment 3. By midnight, the courtyard sagged under the weight of celebration. Petals from marigolds littered the stones, crushed beneath 100 feet. Paper scraps from fireworks floated like ash, clinging to the fountain's rim. The air reeked of ghee, smoke, and incense, cloying in Omar's nostrils. The drum had gone silent, its skin covered. The harmonium sat closed, reeds cooling. Only the murmur of exhausted guests remained, voices low, laughter strained, like embers trying to glow after the fire was gone. Omar sat at the head of a table strewn with crumbs and half-empty glasses. His cousins teased him still, but their jokes fell flat. Their eyes darted toward the dais too often, their voices dipping whenever Layla was mentioned. She had not moved. All night she had sat beneath the canopy, her hands folded, her veil drawn low. She neither ate nor drank. She gave no sign of fatigue, no fidget of restlessness, no flicker of laughter. A statue in red and gold, breathing but not alive. "Your bride is patient," one cousin said, trying for cheer. "Statuesque." His laugh cracked. Omar forced a smile, though his gut twisted. The photographer arrived then, lugging a black box camera on a wooden tripod. He adjusted lamps, directing families into clusters, arranging shawls and dupattas with brisk efficiency. One by one, groups posed, aunts with bangles heavy on their wrists, uncles with tobacco-stained smiles, cousins grinning, children squirming. Each flash seared white into the night, the guests blinking and muttering until their eyes adjusted. Omar stood aside, waiting. Sweat prickled under his sherwani despite the chill. He knew what would come, the couple's portrait. His heart thudded. At last, the photographer called, the groom and bride. Omar's cousins hooped, dragging him toward the dais. His legs felt stiff, his feet heavy. He sat beside Layla, the space between them trembling with unspoken weight. The photographer frowned. Closer. Omar shifted, the scent of rosewater striking him, but beneath it, a sharper note, sulfur, faint but undeniable. He swallowed hard. The photographer lifted the cloth over his camera. "Smile." Omar bared his teeth. The flash exploded. When the photo developed, the courtyard gasped. At first, Omar thought it was only the poor lighting, the old lens. But then he heard the whispers, sharp as wind slicing through trees. "Do you see? Her eyes. Astaghfirullah." Omar's blood iced. He leaned closer. Behind the veil, in the photograph, Layla's eyes glowed. Not the trick of a lamp or the blur of film, but clear, sharp, unmistakable. 2 points of red, gleaming through the cloth like embers behind smoke. The whispers swelled. Some muttered prayers, some crossed themselves. A few women pressed their palms to their mouths. The photographer stammered, blaming his machine, his chemicals, the lamps. But his hands trembled too much to be convincing. Omar tore his gaze from the photograph to the dais. Layla sat exactly as before, head bowed, hands folded. Unmoving. But he felt her eyes on him, even through the veil. Guests began to drift away, muttering excuses. Some left without goodbyes, shawls drawn tight, their children clutched close. Those who remained tried too hard to fill the air with laughter, their cheer brittle as glass. The courtyard dimmed as the generator faltered again, the fairy lights flickering weakly. Omar's aunt touched his shoulder. Her bangles clinked softly as she leaned close. "Rest now, son. Tomorrow will test you more than tonight." Her words offered no comfort. Back in his quarters, the silence pressed heavier than the noise of the courtyard. Omar lit a lamp, the flame small and unsteady. He removed his turban, his hands trembling, and set it aside. The charpoy creaked under his weight as he sat, staring at nothing. The mirror above the drawers caught his eye. For a long time, he resisted looking. But the weight of it drew him, as if the glass itself pulled at his gaze. His reflection stared back, weary, hollow-eyed, lips pale. Then another shape formed behind him. Layla. Her veil was gone in the glass. Her face was pale as chalk, her lips curved in a smile that did not belong to her. And her eyes glowed red, brighter than the photograph, brighter than any lamp. Her mouth moved, whispering words he could not hear. Omar spun around. The room was empty. When he turned back, the mirror was black. Sparkles. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, The First Night. Installment 1, 150 words. The mansion had never been so quiet. After 2 days of wedding festivity, of music echoing off its carved balconies, of fireworks bursting above its tower, of laughter and gossip threading through its corridors, the silence pressed down like a blanket. The courtyard lay littered with petals and scraps of marigold, abandoned trays of food, a drum tipped on its side. The fairy lights still clung to the balconies, but their glow was faint, some bulbs dead, others flickering as though reluctant to keep watch through the night. Omar stood in the corridor outside the bridal chamber, his hand hovering near the door handle. The air smelled of roses and incense, cloying and heavy, almost suffocating. Somewhere in the mansion's depths, a shutter banged against stone, and the peepal tree rustled though no wind stirred. From the men's wing came the last fading sounds of his cousin's laughter as they teased him from afar, calling crude blessings through the walls. Their voices carried the rough energy of men who had eaten too much, drunk too much chai, and relished too much in their jokes. Then their words fell silent one by one, like lanterns being snuffed, leaving Omar alone with the thud of his heart. He pushed the door open. The bridal chamber glowed faintly with lantern light. The room was dressed in red and gold, silk sheets embroidered with zari thread, pillows stacked like clouds, rose petals scattered across the bed. The walls bore garlands of jasmine that had begun to wilt, their fragrance sharp and bitter. On a low table, a brass incense burner sent curls of smoke toward the ceiling, where shadows bent and lingered. Layla sat at the edge of the bed. Her dupatta was still drawn across her head, its crimson veil falling to her waist. She looked impossibly still, her hands folded neatly on her lap, her bangles catching the light. For a moment, Omar thought she might be a statue, carved and set in place. He cleared his throat softly. "It's only us now." She lifted her head slowly. Through the veil, he glimpsed the pale line of her cheek, the dark outline of kohl around her eyes. She did not smile. But she rose with measured grace, and for an instant the bangles chimed like distant bells. Omar closed the door behind him, the sound echoing far too loudly. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against his chest. Omar reached to brush back a strand of her hair. She let him. His fingers trembled slightly as they traced the curve of her cheek. "You look unreal," he said, trying to make it sound like admiration. Her lips curved faintly, but the smile did not reach her eyes. He leaned closer, kissing her gently. For a moment, the kiss was soft, tentative, the kind of tenderness expected of a first night. Her lips were cool but pliant. He let himself breathe, easing into the rhythm, feeling the relief of ordinary intimacy. Then something shifted. Layla's body stiffened, then pressed against him with sudden urgency. Her hands, delicate a moment ago, gripped his shoulders with startling force, pushing him back onto the bed. Omar gasped, startled, half laughing nervously. "Layla," but she was already straddling him, her movements sharp, urgent, her breath rushing hot against his face. Her moans began soft, then grew deeper, harsher, carrying an edge that no longer sounded like a woman's voice. Omar froze. His hands, which had been tentative at her waist, now pushed lightly against her arms. "You're too fast." Her face hovered above his. Her hair fell like a curtain, hiding most of her features, but through the strands her eyes gleamed. Not with affection, not with shyness, but with a cold, burning light. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw her mouth open wider than it should have, her lips peeling back to reveal teeth too sharp, too many. The lantern flickered violently, shadows leaping against the walls. Omar's heart pounded. He whispered instinctively, "Bismillah, in the name of God." The moment the word left his lips, Layla convulsed. A guttural growl escaped her throat, vibrating against his chest. Her hands tightened on his shoulders, pinning him with a strength impossible for her frame. Then she collapsed forward, trembling, her breath ragged. Omar held her, stunned, his mind whirling between fear and denial. He stroked her hair shakily, whispering comfort he did not feel. "It's all right. It's all right." Her body slowly relaxed. She lifted her head slightly, confusion clouding her eyes. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice soft again, almost childlike. "Nothing," Omar lied, kissing her forehead gently. "You were just tired." But his heart told him otherwise. He laid her down gently, covering her with the dupatta as she drifted into uneasy sleep. For a long time, he sat awake beside her, staring at the shifting shadows on the wall. They seemed to move even when the lantern stilled, stretching into shapes he could not name. And when his gaze drifted to the mirror across the room, his breath caught. For in the reflection, he did not see himself seated beside a sleeping bride. He saw himself lying still, eyes open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Open Book The Possessed Bride Chapter 4, the first night installment 2. The mirror's image clung to Omar's mind long after he tore his gaze away. He rubbed his face with both hands, muttering prayers under his breath. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. The familiar rhythm steadied him, but only a little. The air in the room pressed heavy against his lungs. Layla shifted in her sleep beside him. Her breathing came uneven, sometimes soft, sometimes harsh, as though two rhythms fought within her. Once, her lips moved soundlessly, and though no words emerged, Omar felt the vibration in his chest, like an echo without a source. He pulled the blanket up over her and tried to lie down, but his eyes refused to close. An hour passed. The mansion groaned around him. Somewhere far off, a dog barked and then yelped sharply, as if struck. A shutter slammed, though the night was still. Then came a knock. Soft. Deliberate. Against the bridal chamber door. Omar froze. He waited, breath shallow. Another knock followed, 3 beats, slow, patient. He rose, heart hammering. "Who's there?" he whispered, though his voice barely carried. No answer. He pressed his ear to the door. Only silence, then, faintly, the scrape of nails dragging against wood. He stumbled back, whispering Audu billahi min ash-shaytan rajim, I seek refuge with God from the accursed devil, under his breath. When he dared to open the door, the corridor was empty. The jasmine garland swayed slightly, though no wind stirred. He returned to the room, bolting the door behind him. Layla had shifted again. She now lay on her side, facing the wall, her body curled. But her eyes were open. Wide open. "Layla?" She didn't answer. He crept closer, his chest tightening. Her breaths came slow and steady, the breaths of sleep, but her eyes stared unblinking at the wall. He reached out, trembling, and gently pressed her eyelids shut. They stayed closed. Relief trickled through him, though uneasily. He lay back down. Dreams assaulted him. In one, he walked the mansion's north wing, the chained door looming at the end of the corridor. A whisper called his name, sweet and venomous. Omar. Omar. The chain rattled. The door creaked open a fraction. Something pressed against the gap, a hand too thin, too long, its nails scraping metal. He jolted awake, sweat slick on his skin. The lantern still flickered dimly. Layla still lay beside him, her breaths uneven. But the rose petals on the bed had blackened. Their edges curled, crumbling into ash. Unable to endure the suffocating room, Omar lit another lantern and stepped quietly into the corridor. The mansion lay hushed, every shadow deeper than it should be. He passed portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to glisten faintly in the light. One painting, a woman veiled in gold, appeared to turn her head as he walked past. He stumbled, nearly dropping the lantern. He whispered more verses, his tongue dry. Kol Eudu by Rabel Falak. I seek refuge with the Lord of the Dawn. When he returned, the door to the bridal chamber was ajar. He was sure he had bolted it. Inside, Layla was no longer on the bed. For one heart-stopping moment, he thought she had vanished. Then he saw her, standing before the mirror. Her dupatta had slipped completely, her long hair falling wild around her shoulders. She stood utterly still, her hands limp at her sides, her gaze fixed on the glass. Layla, Omar whispered. She did not turn. He approached cautiously, each step measured. The mirror shimmered faintly, as though water rippled across its surface. And in that reflection, Layla was not alone. Another bride stood behind her. This second figure was darker, taller, her veil tattered, her face obscured except for eyes burning like coal. She leaned close to Layla's ear, whispering, though the glass made no sound. Omar's blood ran cold. He reached out, grabbing Layla's wrist, pulling her back. The reflection blinked out. Only themselves remained in the glass, pale, shaken. Layla sagged against him, her body weak. "What are you doing out of bed?" he asked, his voice breaking. She blinked slowly, confusion clouding her features. I was waiting. For what? Her lips parted, but another voice came out, low, male, guttural. For you. Omar staggered back, dragging her with him. Her body trembled violently, then went limp. He laid her back onto the bed, covering her quickly, whispering every prayer he knew. His words filled the room, colliding with the heavy silence. The lanterns flickered again, shadows stretching across the walls. For a heartbeat, one shadow loomed above the rest, a figure with horns, crouched at the ceiling, watching. When Omar blinked, it was gone. Layla closed her eyes at last, her breaths evening out. But Omar knew sleep would not come for him. He sat rigid in the chair by the bed, clutching the lantern, whispering prayers until his voice cracked. The mirror stood silent, but he avoided its gaze. Chapter 4, the first night installment 3. The hours dragged, each minute stretching like a rope pulled too taut. Omar sat rigid in the chair, the lantern flickering weakly in his hand. His lips moved through verses until they cracked with dryness. Every so often, he glanced toward Layla, reassuring himself she was still there, still breathing. Her face softened in sleep, but her body shifted strangely, jerking as though strings pulled her from above. The jasmine garlands on the wall began to sag, petals dropping one by one. Their fragrance soured, filling the room with a stench like rot. Omar pressed his sleeve to his nose, gagging quietly. Then came the sound. It began as a whisper, faint, too soft to be understood. He leaned forward, heart pounding. The sound grew, layering upon itself, as though many mouths spoke at once in a language older than his own. The words crawled into his ears, sharp as glass. He realized with dread they were not coming from the corridor. They were coming from Layla's lips. Her eyes flew open. Not wide, but too wide, lids straining, whites gleaming in the lantern light. She sat upright in a single motion, spine rigid, hair falling wild around her face. Her mouth moved, spilling the whispers louder now, though none of the words made sense. Omar shot to his feet, clutching the lantern like a shield. Layla. She turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes glowed faintly red. And then she smiled. It was not the shy smile of a new bride, nor even the mocking smile of someone amused. It was a grin too wide, too sharp, a curve of lips that showed teeth far beyond what her mouth should hold. The lantern flame guttered violently. Shadows leapt up the walls, stretching into monstrous forms. Omar stumbled back, whispering prayers through his clenched teeth. "Oh God, protect us." Layla rose to her feet, her movements stiff, unnatural. She stepped toward the mirror. The glass rippled faintly, as though stirred by unseen water. And then Omar saw it clearly. 2 brides. Layla stood there, veiled in crimson and gold. But beside her in the reflection stood another, taller, darker, her veil torn and blackened. Her face was hidden in shadow, but her eyes burned like coals. The second bride leaned close to Layla, their forms almost touching. Her mouth moved, whispering directly into Layla's ear. Layla's reflection nodded slowly, obediently. "No," Omar gasped. "This isn't real." But the second bride turned her head and looked straight at him. The lantern in his hand shattered with a sharp crack, plunging the room into darkness. Only the faint glow from the mirror remained, painting the chamber in eerie light. Layla's body convulsed. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, a guttural growl tearing from her throat. Omar lunged forward, trying to steady her, but the air between them thickened like invisible chains. He struggled to move, each step a battle against unseen weight. Finally, he reached her, gripping her shoulders. "Fight it, Layla. Fight it." Her head snapped back, her eyes blazing. The voice that answered was not hers. "She is mine." The words shook the chamber, echoing from the walls. The mirror cracked. A thin line split the glass from top to bottom, splintering the reflection into fragments. Birds circled the peepal tree in frantic patterns before scattering, their cries sharp and unnatural. Omar had not slept. He sat slumped in the bridal chamber chair, his eyes burning, his body numb. Layla lay beneath the quilt, motionless, her breathing steady, almost too steady. The memory of her eyes glowing red, of the cracked mirror, of the whisper that did not belong to her, all clung to him like a second skin. When the first call of Far echoed from the mosque in the village, he rose shakily. He performed ablution with water from the brass jug, his hands trembling, and prayed on the carpet by the window. Each verse steadied him, but when he finished, he glanced again at Layla. She had not stirred once. The door creaked open, and his aunt stepped in quietly, her shawl drawn tight around her. She looked first at Layla, then at him. Her eyes softened, but her lips pressed into a thin line. "You look like you have seen a jinn," she murmured. Omar flinched. She crossed the room, placing a cup of tea on the low table. The steam curled upward, fragrant with cardamom. "Drink, son. You must be strong." He lowered himself onto the bed's edge, his hands curling around the cup. The warmth steadied him, but not enough. "Aunt," he whispered. "Tell me, has this house always been like this?" Her eyes flickered to the mirror on the wall, now whole again, as though it had never cracked. She drew in a long breath. "There are things you should not ask. But since you are part of this house now, you must know. Some brides who entered this mansion," her voice faltered. "They did not leave as brides." The words gnawed at Omar all morning. By midday, the mansion buzzed with family activity again. Relatives drifted through the courtyards, sipping tea, recounting the wedding, speaking of dowries and land. But beneath the chatter ran a quiet current of unease. When Omar passed, conversations paused too late, laughter died too quickly. The servants, too, avoided the north wing more openly now. One boy carrying water spilled half his jug when a door slammed there, though the corridor was empty. He whispered a prayer before hurrying off, leaving wet footprints on the stone. Omar wandered restlessly. The portraits along the walls seemed sharper in daylight, the eyes more alive. He stopped before one, a bride in crimson, painted long ago, her veil falling across her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and hollow. Beneath the frame, an inscription read, Amiran Begum, 1897. He had never heard the name. Behind him, his uncle's voice startled him. "Don't stare too long, son. Some portraits watch back." The uncle chuckled, but his tone held no humor. That afternoon, Omar sought Tariq. He found him in the courtyard, oiling the hinges of an old gate. The older man looked up, his eyes narrowing as he read Omar's face. "You did not sleep." "No." Omar swallowed. "Tariq Chacha, what do you know about Layla's family? About this mansion?" Tariq wiped his hands slowly, choosing his words with care. "This land is old. Older than you imagine. Stories cling to it like vines. Not all brides here were blessed. Some were claimed." "By whom?" Omar demanded. Tariq glanced toward the north wing. The chain door gleamed faintly in the distance. "By whatever lives beyond that door." That evening, as the sky reddened with sunset, Omar returned to the bridal chamber. Layla was awake at last, sitting upright against the pillows. Her face was pale, but her eyes seemed clear. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "I must have frightened you," she said softly. Omar sat beside her, studying her face. "Do you remember?" She shook her head slowly. "Only dreams. Whispers. Shadows." She touched her temple as though in pain. "It felt like something was inside me." Omar clasped her hand tightly. "We will fight it. Together." Her smile wavered. For a heartbeat, her eyes flickered, a spark of red glimmering before fading again. Chapter 5, The Mansion's Secrets Installment 2. The following day brought no relief. The sunlight seeped into the mansion, spilling across its courtyards, yet its warmth never touched the walls. The air remained damp and heavy, as if the house itself swallowed light. Omar tried to tell himself it was his exhaustion, the night's terrors clinging to his mind, but even the servants moved differently, their eyes darting to corners, their prayers whispered more urgently. At breakfast, he sat among uncles and cousins. Brass trays of parathas and steaming chai were set before them, the aroma rich and comforting. Yet every bite turned dry in Omar's mouth. Across the room, Layla sat with the women. She ate little, her movements mechanical, her face calm but too calm, like a mask worn too tightly. One of the older women, Aunt Shireen again, slipped a small pouch into Layla's lap when no one was watching. Omar caught the exchange. After the meal, he asked his aunt quietly, "What was that?" "An amulet," she replied, her tone hushed but firm. "Protection. You should wear one as well, son. There are things here that mock even the strongest faith." Omar bristled. "Faith should be enough." Her eyes softened with pity. "Then pray harder. And keep her close. A bride is most vulnerable in her first days." Later, Omar walked the courtyard alone. The fog had not lifted though the sun stood high overhead. Chickens wandered near the fountain but refused to step beyond the shadow of the north wing. A stray dog padded in, sniffed the air, and growled before bolting back through the gate. A servant girl carrying laundry paused when she saw him staring at the chained door. Her face paled. "Sahib," she whispered, clutching her bundle tighter, "do not linger there. That wing eats voices. If you call for help, no one will hear." "What do you mean?" Omar pressed, stepping toward her. She shook her head, backing away. "Ask your elders. We are told not to speak." And she hurried off, her bare feet slapping against the stone. The chain rattled faintly. Omar froze. There was no wind. By afternoon, visitors from the village arrived, women with trays of sweets, neighbors who came with blessings, some bearing gifts of cloth or jewelry. They crowded into the women's wing, surrounding Layla with chatter and song. But the air shifted the moment she entered. Conversations faltered, laughter cracked. One woman, older, sharp-eyed, leaned close to Omar's aunt, her voice just loud enough to carry. "I warned you not to wed her into this mansion. Have you forgotten Amiran Begum?" Aunt Shireen's face tightened. "Do not speak her name. But the woman pressed on. 3 brides gone mad in this house. 3 families ruined. And now, her eyes flicked toward Layla, lowering. Now the curse awakens again. Omar's chest clenched. He moved closer, pretending to help with the trays, but his ears burned with every word. The old woman spat softly on the floor, muttering a verse for protection. The walls here remember, even if you choose not to. When the visitors departed, Layla retreated to the bridal chamber. Omar followed, watching as she lay down, her face pale, her fingers tightening around the small pouch his aunt had given her. He sat beside her. "Do you feel it too?" he asked. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment they seemed soft, vulnerable. "It's like something follows me. Even when I close my eyes, it stands at the door." Omar grasped her hand tightly. "We will fight it. I will not let it take you." Her lips curved faintly. But just as quickly, her expression shifted, a flicker of something darker passing across her features. Her voice lowered, guttural for a heartbeat. "And if I wanted to?" Omar recoiled. "Layla," she blinked rapidly, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What? What did I say?" He forced a smile, brushing her hair back. "Nothing. You're tired." But his hand trembled as it touched her cheek. That evening, Omar sought Tariq again. The older man was sharpening a sickle by the barn, the metallic scrape carrying sharp in the air. Omar stood before him, desperate. "Tariq Chacha," he said, his voice low. "Tell me the truth. Who was Amiran Begum?" Tariq's hand stilled. For a long moment, only the scrape of crickets filled the silence. Then he sighed, setting the sickle aside. "She was a bride here, long ago. Married into this mansion when it was still strong. But she was not alone when she entered. Something came with her. Something that wanted the bloodline, the house, the land. What happened to her? She vanished. Some say she ran. Some say she burned. But the elders know, she was taken. And each generation since, another bride has been claimed." Omar's blood ran cold. Then Layla, Tariq's eyes sharpened. "If you love her, guard her. But guard yourself as well. Once the jinn takes root, it does not let go easily." Chapter 5, The Mansion's Secrets Installment 3. The sun dipped low, staining the horizon red. In the courtyards, relatives prepared for evening tea, setting brass trays with steaming cups of dud patty, milk tea, and plates of biscuits. The chatter rose again, but it felt forced, laughter brittle and quick to vanish. Omar lingered at the edge, his eyes drawn again and again to the chained north wing. The door gleamed faintly in the dying light. No servant passed near it. Even the shadows seemed to bend away from it. He excused himself quietly and slipped into the corridor. The further he walked, the cooler the air grew. The jasmine garlands here were long wilted, petals blackened on the floor. The walls bore portraits like watchmen, brides, grooms, ancestors staring with painted eyes. One painting in particular stopped him cold. It was the same bride he had seen earlier, Amiran Begum. Her crimson veil draped across her shoulders, her lips pale, her eyes hollow. But now, in the sunset glow, the paint shimmered. Her pupils seemed faintly red. He stepped closer, heart thudding. For an instant, her mouth curved into the faintest smile. He stumbled back, muttering verses under his breath. The chain on the north wing door rattled. Omar froze. The sound grew sharper, metal clinking, scraping, as if something on the other side tested its strength. He dared a step closer. The air pressed thick, his chest tightening. He placed his hand against the wood. From within, a whisper rose. "Omar," he staggered back, bile rising in his throat. The voice was soft, feminine, yet heavy with something older. "Come closer." His knees weakened. He nearly fell, clutching the wall. The portraits seemed to lean forward, their painted faces straining to listen. A sudden slam shook the door, the chain clattering violently. Omar fled, his footsteps pounding across the corridor. When he returned to the courtyard, he found Layla seated among the women. At first, relief washed through him, until he noticed the way they sat. The women no longer surrounded her with laughter and song. Instead, they sat a step back, their voices hushed, their eyes wary. Layla sat perfectly still, sipping tea, her lips curved faintly, as if in private amusement. A child toddled near her, giggling. The moment he reached her lap, he froze, his giggle breaking into a shriek. He clawed at his mother's shawl until she scooped him away, eyes darting toward Layla in thinly veiled fear. Omar rushed forward. "Enough," he said too sharply. "She is only tired." The women nodded quickly, but their gazes did not soften. One murmured a verse under her breath before turning away. Layla looked up at him, her eyes glimmering faintly. "Why do they fear me, Omar?" His throat tightened. "They are superstitious. Pay them no mind." Her smile widened. "Perhaps they are wise." That night, after the family retired, Omar paced the bridal chamber. He felt the weight of the portraits even here, as though the eyes of generations bore down on him. Layla lay on the bed, her face turned toward the mirror. He had covered it with a cloth earlier, unable to bear its gaze. But now the cloth had slipped. The glass glimmered faintly in the lamplight. "Don't look at it," he whispered. But Layla's voice was distant, almost dreamy. "She's waiting." Omar froze. "Who?" "The bride before me." Her eyes slid shut. "She said it is my turn." The lamp flickered violently. Omar tore the cloth down, covering the mirror again. The corridors emptied, and with them went the last illusion of safety. Uncle Tariq was always the first to warn, "Stay indoors when the sun dips. Son, there are things that do not respect walls." His voice carried authority that came not from learning but from survival. The villagers respected him because he knew how to appease the unseen. Layla never dismissed his warnings. Since entering the mansion as a bride, she felt watched, not by her in-laws, not even by Omar, but by something older, something hidden in the corners where the lantern light failed to reach. That evening, as the call of Maghrib drifted across the fields, Layla stood at the balcony. Her dupatta lifted in the humid wind, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant crops. She longed, absurdly, for Lahore's chaos, rickshaws honking, hawkers selling gol gappi at Liberty Market, the neon-lit signs of Canal Road. Here, time seemed to bleed. The mansion wasn't simply old, it was outside of years. Omar came to stand beside her, resting his hand on her shoulder. His touch was warm, but she sensed his tension too. His jaw worked as he stared at the horizon where the mustard fields darkened into silhouettes. "You've gone pale again," he said quietly. "You didn't eat your dinner." Layla tried to smile. "I can't explain it. This place, at night, it feels like the walls are alive. Sometimes I swear I hear whispers when I close my eyes. Words I don't understand. Not Urdu. Not Punjabi. Something else." He forced a soft laugh, though his eyes betrayed him. "We're exhausted. Weddings are overwhelming, and this house adds to it. We'll leave soon. Tariq uncle can manage until we decide whether to keep it or sell it." But both of them looked toward the locked north wing, its heavy doors carved with Quranic verses, their lines cracked and faded. Chains bound them, but the padlock gleamed as if newly placed. Behind those doors, generations had whispered of tragedy. Omar's grandmother had been found dead there decades ago, kneeling at the mihrab, her eyes wide open, her lips frozen mid-prayer. The servant still said that her voice sometimes echoed in the courtyard after midnight. When night deepened, the mansion fell utterly still. The last servants retreated, shutting their doors firmly, muttering Bismillah, in the name of God, as they pulled their quilts tight. The lanterns in the corridors flickered as if fighting invisible wind. Layla lay beside Omar, but sleep refused her. Her ears strained against the silence. Somewhere far away, an owl hooted. Then the sound came, faint at first, delicate, unmistakable. Anklets. The metallic chime of pile, soft but deliberate, echoing in the corridor. Her breath caught. She sat upright, clutching her dupatta around her shoulders. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. Omar stirred, blinking into the darkness. Then his eyes widened. The anklets chimed again, closer this time, each step deliberate, like a bride walking with ritual grace. He swung his legs to the floor, the marble shockingly cold against his feet. "Stay here," he said, though his voice was not steady. The anklets came nearer, pausing outside their door. Omar held his breath. The silence pressed heavier than stone. He took 2 steps toward the door, his hand stretching out. The anklets stopped. No footsteps retreated. No one spoke. Only silence. Layla's heart hammered. She clutched the edge of the quilt until her knuckles whitened. "Don't open it," she whispered, almost pleading. But Omar's hand was already on the handle. He yanked the door wide. The corridor lay empty. Jasmine garlands hung limp on the walls, their scent now sour, almost rotten. The lantern sputtered, shadows crawling like insects across the floor. And faintly, from the end of the corridor where the chained doors waited, came the sound of something dragging across stone. Omar slammed the door shut, bolting it with trembling hands. He turned back to his wife, his face pale. "You see," she whispered, her voice thin. "The house is awake at night." Omar said nothing. He sat on the edge of the bed, pressing his palms to his face. In the heavy silence, his breath came ragged, broken. Outside, the anklets chimed again. This time, moving away. Chapter 6, The Veil of Night Installment 2. The morning did not bring relief. The call of far rolled through the misty fields, answered by the crowing of restless roosters. But inside the mansion, the dawn light looked sickly, as if filtered through smoke. The shadows of the night had not lifted, they clung to the corners, stretched beneath doorways, lurking even as the sun rose. Layla sat on the charpoy with a shawl wrapped tight around her. Her eyes were rimmed red from lack of sleep. Omar had dozed briefly after the anklets faded into silence, but she had not closed her eyes once. Every time she tried, she heard the faint jingle again, circling the courtyard, returning to their door. The smell of paratha's frying reached them faintly. Relatives had gathered for breakfast, their voices muffled through the thick walls. Layla rose reluctantly, straightening her dupatta. A new bride could not afford to appear weak before the family. In Punjabi homes, strength was expected, particularly from women who had joined a household by marriage. Yet when she entered the courtyard with Omar, conversations paused. Cousins smiled too quickly, uncles cleared their throats. The women, huddled near the stove with steaming cups of dud patty, milk tea, lowered their voices. Everyone knew something had passed in the night, though no one dared name it openly. Aunt Shireen broke the silence. "Come, daughter," she said, patting the seat beside her. "Have some tea. You need warmth in your body." Layla sat, her hands trembling as she accepted the cup. The tea smelled of cardamom, rich and soothing, but it cooled too fast in the air, steam fading before it touched her lips. One of the cousins giggled nervously. Did the bride sleep well? The question was innocent enough in a normal household, part of the playful teasing reserved for a suhag rat, nuptial night. But here the words landed heavy, the silence that followed betraying unease. Layla forced a faint smile, nodding, though her throat refused the tea. Aunt Shireen pressed a small bundle into her palm. A piece of cloth, knotted carefully. An taweez, amulet. Wear it beneath your clothes. Do not remove it, not even for bathing. It carries verses from the Quran. It will shield you. Layla clutched it gratefully. Across the courtyard, Omar was being pulled aside by Uncle Tariq. The older man's face looked drawn, his eyes shadowed as though he, too, had heard the anklets. They spoke beneath the neem tree where the courtyard met the crumbling wall of the north wing. What happened? Tariq asked bluntly. Omar hesitated, glancing toward Layla. We heard footsteps. Pile. They stopped outside our door. Tariq's face did not change, though his hand tightened around his walking stick. And you opened it? I had to. Foolish boy, Tariq hissed. Curiosity is a door of its own. Once opened, it does not close so easily. Omar stiffened. What is in this house, uncle? I cannot protect her if I do not know. Tariq's gaze drifted to the chained doors of the north wing. This mansion has buried more brides than it has blessed. My grandmother used to say, every 50 years, the land calls for another. Some thought it superstition. But I have seen enough. Omar's breath caught. A curse? Not a curse. Tariq lowered his voice. A bargain. Someone, long before us, invited something here. And it never left. That afternoon, as relatives dozed in the heat and children played with kites on the terrace, Layla wandered into the inner courtyard. A goat tethered near the fountain bleated sharply, tugging against its rope. Its eyes rolled white, fixed on the darkened arches of the north wing. When she stepped closer, it thrashed violently, snapping the rope, fleeing until servants caught it. A murmur spread through the courtyard. One servant muttered, even animals won't go near that door. Another replied, because they see what we cannot. The words clung to Layla's skin like thorns. She moved toward the chained doors almost without realizing, her feet drawn to the shadow they cast. Her fingers hovered above the rusted links. The metal was cold, colder than ice, though the afternoon air sweltered. From the other side came a whisper. Her name. She stumbled back, nearly falling. The servants gasped, whispering hurried supplication to God. One ran to fetch Tariq. By the time he arrived, sweat streaked her brow. She tried to speak, but the word caught in her throat, Mary Nam Liatha. It called my name. Tariq's face hardened. He placed his hand firmly on her shoulder. Do not listen when it calls. That is how it enters. That evening, when the lamps were lit, the women gathered Layla in the bridal chamber. They tied red threads around her wrists, muttering protective verses. One burned dried chilies in a clay pot, letting the acrid smoke fill the air. Another circled a lump of salt around Layla's head 3 times before casting it into the fire. These things chase away the evil eye, Aunt Shireen explained. And sometimes, worse than the evil eye. Layla sat stiffly, enduring the rituals. The smoke made her cough, tears stinging her eyes. She clutched the amulet at her neck until her knuckles whitened. The women exchanged glances, their whispers carrying half-stories. Do you remember Banu? She never returned from her rukhsati, and Zulika, years before, her cries could be heard for nights. The names were unfamiliar to Layla, but the weight of them filled the room. Omar entered as the rituals ended. The women shuffled out, leaving only the couple. He sat beside her, his face drawn. Uncle told me the stories. There were others before you. Brides who, changed. Layla's breath caught. Changed. Taken. His voice cracked. Possessed. Silence stretched. The only sound was the hiss of the lamp. Layla shivered. Omar, what if it's already begun? Her voice faltered. Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, something flickered in them, a glimmer of red, gone as quickly as it appeared. Omar reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. We will fight it. Together. No matter what the house wants. But the shadows behind them lengthened, curling across the wall like fingers. Chapter 6, The Veil of Night Installment 3. The night pressed in heavier than before. The mansion seemed to exhale shadows, filling every corridor with a density that swallowed sound. The servants had long since locked their doors, leaving the central courtyard empty but for the rustle of the neem branches. The only light came from a few kerosene lanterns sputtering against the dark, their glow weak and unsteady. Layla lay beneath the quilt, her eyes open, unblinking. Omar paced the room, restless, clutching a string of prayer beads. Each bead clicked between his fingers as he whispered verses, his voice hoarse with repetition. He feared that if he stopped even for a breath, the silence would return, and with it, the whispers. At last, Layla spoke. Omar. Her voice was soft, almost ordinary. He turned at once, relief flickering through him. Yes. Her lips curved faintly. Why do you pray so much? Don't you trust me? He frowned. It isn't you I fear. Her smile widened. Then who? Before he could answer, she sat upright in a single, rigid motion. The lamp flickered violently, shadows stretching long across the walls. Her hair spilled loose, hiding half her face, but her eyes gleamed through, faintly red, like embers burning in ash. Omar clutched the prayer beads tighter, his breath catching. Recite with me, Layla. Say it with me. La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah. Her lips moved. The words that emerged were not the Shahida but something guttural, ancient, crawling. The walls vibrated faintly with the sound, as though they too carried the chant. Omar stumbled back, choking on his own breath. The mirror, still covered by cloth, shuddered against the wall. The fabric shifted as though stirred by wind, though the air was still. Omar grabbed it, holding it in place, but a crack split through the glass beneath. Layla tilted her head toward the sound. Her laughter was soft, lilting, but layered with another voice beneath, deeper, male, resonant. She's waiting. Omar's knees weakened. Who? The bride before me. Her voice dropped to a growl. The one who never left. Suddenly, the door rattled violently. Knocks thundered against the wood, not fists but the sound of dozens of hands, slapping, scraping, pulling. Omar lunged forward, bolting it shut with trembling fingers. Sweat poured down his back as the wood shook under unseen weight. Layla rose from the bed, moving toward the mirror. The cloth fell away completely, revealing two reflections. Hers, pale and trembling. And beside her, a taller, darker figure, the shadow bride, veil tattered, eyes burning red. Omar shouted a verse, his voice raw, Audu billahi min ash-shaytan ir-rajim. I seek refuge with God from the accursed devil. The knock ceased at once. The mirror cracked again, spiderwebbing across the surface. But the second bride remained untouched within, pressing her hand against the glass. Her nails scraped, the sound shrieking in the air. The chain on the north wing rattled. From beyond the locked doors came a low moan, rising into a scream that carried through the mansion. Servants cried out from their quarters, some praying loudly, others sobbing. Omar dragged Layla away from the mirror, clutching her to his chest. She thrashed violently, strength surging through her slight frame, nearly throwing him aside. Her nails cut into his arms, blood welling where she clawed. Her voice came layered now, two tones speaking at once. She is mine. Omar pressed his forehead to hers, sobbing through his words. No. You are mine. You are Layla, my wife. You belong to no one else. For a heartbeat, her eyes softened. He glimpsed her real self, terrified, pleading. Omar, help me. Then the red flared again, and she screamed, a sound so sharp it cracked the lamp glass. Uncle Tariq burst through the door with two servants behind him. Each held Qurans in their hands, reciting verses loudly, their voices filling the room. Tariq seized Layla's wrist, forcing the amulet tighter around her arm. She shrieked, smoke rising faintly from her skin as though burned. Omar staggered back, covering his ears as the voices clashed, Quranic recitation against the guttural growl spilling from her throat. The room shook, plaster crumbling from the ceiling, rose petals scattering like ash. At last, with a final convulsion, Layla collapsed. Her chest heaved, her eyes rolled shut. The mirror shattered completely, shards scattering across the floor. The second bride's reflection vanished with it. Silence fell. Only the sound of their ragged breathing remained. Tariq's face was grim. This was only the beginning. Omar wiped blood from his arms, his body trembling. Then how do we end it? Tariq glanced toward the north wing. The chain rattled once more, softly this time, as if in warning. We don't, he whispered. Not yet. The mansion has not had its bride in 50 years. And it will not stop asking. Omar looked down at his unconscious wife, fear hollowing his chest. Because he knew then, she had already been chosen. Sparkle's end of Chapter 6. Chapter 7, The Bride's Awakening Installment 1. The morning sun painted the courtyard in gold, but inside the bridal chamber the air remained heavy, still damp with the smoke of last night's broken lamp. Shards of glass had been swept aside by a servant, yet Omar could not forget the sound, the shriek that cracked the mirror, the growl that had come from his wife's throat. Now, as dawn crept through the lattice window, Layla stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glistening in the weak light. For a moment, Omar's chest loosened. She looked almost normal, pale, yes, but tender, her gaze soft as she blinked at him. You stayed awake all night, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I couldn't leave you. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his hand trembling. For a moment she smiled, the familiar warmth of the woman he had married. Relief surged in him like water. He kissed her hand, whispering thanks to God. But then her expression shifted. The smile froze too wide, stretching unnaturally. Her eyes lingered not on him but on the ceiling, as though something above fascinated her. A whisper brushed her lips, not words he knew, not even language, but guttural syllables that made the skin at his nape crawl. He recoiled, heart hammering. Layla. She blinked, her smile fading. Confusion clouded her eyes. What is it? Omar swallowed hard. Nothing. You're tired still. But when he looked into her eyes, he swore he glimpsed a flicker of red, like embers smoldering deep within. Later, in the courtyard, family gathered for breakfast. Platters of parathas and bowls of yogurt were laid out, the steam of dud patty, milk tea, curling in the cool morning air. Cousins teased one another, uncles discussed crop yields, aunties shared gossip about Lahore relatives. Yet when Layla entered, the noise dipped. Conversation slowed, laughter faltered. She sat gracefully beside Aunt Shireen, accepting a cup of chai. Her hands trembled only slightly, her eyes lowered modestly. For a few minutes she appeared every bit the dutiful bride. Then the child came. Little Ayaan toddled over, giggling, clutching a wooden toy. He stumbled into her lap, his face bright with innocence. The family smiled, until Ayaan froze. His laughter died in his throat. His small body stiffened, his eyes widening in terror. Then he screamed. The sound cut through the courtyard, shrill and panicked. He clawed at his mother's shawl, trying to scramble away. His mother rushed forward, pulling him close, glaring toward Layla in confusion. Layla sat unmoving. Her smile was faint, her eyes blank. Omar hurried to her side, his heart thudding. He's just a child, he said quickly, too quickly. Children cry. But no one believed him. Whispers stirred among the women. Aminan Begum. The old curse. Another bride taken. After breakfast, Tariq pulled Omar aside beneath the neem tree. His voice was low, sharp. She is not safe. She is my wife, Omar snapped, though his voice cracked. She is not hers anymore. Tariq's eyes bored into him. You saw it last night. Don't pretend. The jinn has marked her. And once it claims, it does not leave easily. Omar shook his head violently. There must be something we can do. A Maulvi, a healer, Ruqya recitations. Tariq's mouth tightened. Perhaps. But the mansion is older than all of us. The one inside her does not fear small prayers. It feeds on them. Omar turned away, his fists clenching. Then I will not let it win. Whatever this house wants, it cannot have her. But his words trembled. That afternoon, the women surrounded Layla again, tying fresh red threads around her wrists, circling her with burning chilies and salt. She endured it in silence, her eyes half closed. Look how calmly she sits, one cousin whispered. If it were only nerves, she would be restless. Another hissed, do not speak. The jinn listens. Omar watched helplessly as they muttered supplications to God. But when one woman placed a Quran near Layla's lap, the bride flinched. Her hand twitched violently, knocking the holy book to the floor. Gasps filled the room. Layla's eyes widened as if in horror at what she had done, but before she could speak, another voice spilled from her lips, guttural and male, she is mine. The women screamed. Chapter 7, The Bride's Awakening Installment 2 gasps filled the room as the Quran struck the floor. The sound reverberated against the stone walls, louder than it should have been, like a drumbeat announcing calamity. The women shrank back, some covering their mouths with their dupattas, others whispering verses in trembling voices. Aunt Shireen lunged forward first, scooping the sacred book into her hands. Her fingers shook as she kissed it and pressed it to her forehead before returning it to the table with reverence. She turned on Layla, her eyes blazing with fear and disbelief. What have you done, Beatty? Layla's lips parted, her breath quick and shallow. Tears brimmed in her eyes. I didn't mean, but her voice fractured, lowering into a guttural growl, she is mine. The women screamed, scattering like startled birds. One fainted on the spot, her bangles clattering against the floor. Another dragged her daughter out of the room, whispering Auda Billahi min ash-shaytan rajim, I seek refuge with God from the accursed devil, over and over as though it might stitch reality back together. Layla's head snapped back, her hair spilling wild, her body jerking as though unseen strings pulled at her limbs. You cannot take her back. Tariq's voice rose louder, the verses pouring from him like fire. The air thickened, the lamp flickered violently, shadows stretching long and thin across the walls. Then Layla convulsed one final time before collapsing, limp in Omar's arms. Silence. Only their ragged breathing filled the room. They laid her on the bed, covering her with a shawl. Omar brushed the damp hair from her face, whispering her name. Her breaths came shallow but even, her expression strangely calm, as if she were merely sleeping. Tariq closed the Quran, his hands trembling despite his steady face. This is no simple possession, he said darkly. It is tied to this mansion. The land itself feeds it. Omar's throat tightened. Then what do we do? Prayers must continue. Day and night. We must not let it grow stronger. But, Tariq hesitated, his eyes clouded. I fear the family will not stand with her. They will want her gone before the curse spreads. Omar's fists clenched. She is my wife. She stays. Tariq placed a hand on his shoulder. Then prepare yourself. Love alone cannot shield you. By evening, word had spread through the mansion despite their attempts at secrecy. In the women's wing, whispers hissed like wind through reeds. Aunties spoke of Aminan Begum, the bride of a century past who vanished without trace. Cousins exchanged fearful glances, pulling their children close whenever Layla passed. At dinner, the atmosphere curdled. The meal was simple, lentils, roti, a bowl of chicken curry, yet few ate. Conversations circled around harvests, Lahore markets, politics, but every line bent back to silence when Layla lifted her spoon. She ate quietly, her face lowered. But when she raised her eyes, several relatives looked away quickly, as though scorched. After dinner, Omar overheard two aunts in the veranda. She must be sent back to her family. Before it is too late. Too late for what? For all of us. That night, as the household prepared for rest, Omar stayed close to Layla. She seemed calm again, her head resting against his shoulder as they sat in their chamber. The events of the day felt like a fever dream, something he wanted desperately to deny. But then, without warning, her body stiffened. Her head lifted slowly, her eyes gleaming red. "Omar," she whispered. His breath caught. "Yes, love." Her lips twisted into a grin. "Not you. The one behind you." Omar spun. The room was empty. Only the mirror reflected his pale face, his trembling hands. He turned back, but Layla was no longer on the bed. She stood before the mirror, her hands pressed against the glass. The reflection flickered, not one bride but two, layered, overlapping. And then, before his eyes, her reflection turned its head independently from her body. She laughed again, the sound splitting into two tones. "We are not leaving." Omar stumbled back, crashing against the wall. His voice broke into desperate prayer, his beads slipping through trembling fingers. The mirror shuddered violently. Cracks split across its surface, though Layla remained untouched before it. Her reflection, or whatever shared it, pressed forward, as though trying to crawl through. At that moment, Tariq burst in, Quran raised, his voice thunderous with verses. The reflection shrieked, its face contorting into a mask of rage. The mirror shattered, glass exploding across the floor. Layla collapsed once more, limp in Omar's arms. When silence returned, Tariq's face was grim. "This cannot be hidden much longer. Tomorrow, the elders will demand she be sent away. Perhaps even, worse." Omar cradled his wife, tears streaking his face. "No. I will not abandon her." Tariq's eyes softened with sorrow. "Then be ready. The mansion does not forgive those who defy it." Chapter 7, The Bride's Awakening Installment 3. By the next morning, the mansion was buzzing. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps, curling through every veranda, slipping beneath every carved doorframe. The elders had arrived, 3 white-bearded men from the village, cousins and uncles from Lahore who had stayed after the wedding, even the imam from the nearby mosque. They gathered in the main hall beneath the fading fresco of lions and peacocks, their turbans bright but their faces grim. Omar entered with Tariq at his side. His palms were slick with sweat, his throat raw from a night of restless prayer. At the far end of the hall, Layla sat quietly, her dupatta pulled low over her brow, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked demure, almost fragile, and yet the room seemed to tilt around her presence. An elder cleared his throat, his voice slow and heavy. "We have heard troubling things." Another leaned forward, his gaze sharp. The Quran was struck to the ground. A child screamed in her arms. The servants whisper of voices in the halls. "Is this true?" Omar's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, but Tariq spoke first. "It is true. But you know as well as I that this mansion has always been restless. Do not place all the burden on this girl." Murmurs rippled across the room. One man spat softly. "Do not insult us, Tariq. We all remember Amin and Begum. We all remember the screams. This is the same." Layla lifted her head slowly. Her eyes glimmered in the lantern light, soft brown for a moment, then, just for an instant, red. Gasps filled the hall. "I am only tired," she said, her voice delicate. "Do not fear me." Her tone was gentle, convincing. For a moment the room softened. But Omar, standing close, saw it, the faint curve of her lips, the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. The Imam stepped forward, Quran in hand. His voice was calm but firm. If you are pure, Beatty, then join me. Repeat after me. He recited Ayat al-Kursi, his voice strong, echoing against the walls. All eyes turned to Layla. She smiled faintly, then began to recite. For the first line, her voice was steady. But halfway through, her lips faltered. Her tone warped, deepened, fractured into two voices at once. She is mine, the second voice growled. The hall erupted. Some women shrieked, others clutched their children. The Imam's voice rose louder, battling the growl with verse after verse. The air grew stifling, hot, as if the mansion itself pulsed with anger. Layla stood, her body jerking in unnatural motions. Her dupatta slipped, her hair cascading wild around her shoulders. She tilted her head back, laughing, a sound that rattled the frescoed ceiling. Her shadow on the wall stretched, elongated, horns curving where none existed on her head. Omar rushed to her, gripping her arms. Layla. Fight it. Stay with me. Her eyes blazed red, but for a moment, through the cracks, her true self flickered. Omar, she whispered, her voice small, pleading. He clung to her. Yes, love. I'm here. But the voice that followed was not hers. He cannot have you. You are promised. With a violent jerk, she flung him back as though he were weightless. He slammed against the wall, the air knocked from his lungs. Gasps rippled across the hall. Two uncles rushed forward, trying to restrain her, but she threw them aside with unnatural strength. Her bangles snapped, clattering across the marble floor. Tariq advanced, reciting verses, pressing forward despite the heat that thickened around her. His beard dripped with sweat, his voice unwavering. By Allah's name, leave her. Layla shrieked. The windows of the hall rattled, dust falling from the beams. The chandelier swayed violently, chains creaking. Then, just as suddenly, she collapsed. Silence fell. She lay crumpled on the marble floor, her chest rising and falling shallowly. Her dupatta lay twisted, her hair scattered like a dark halo. The room was frozen, every face pale, every eye fixed on her. At last the eldest man spoke, his voice shaking. She cannot remain here. If the jinn has claimed her, she must be sent away before it takes more of us. Omar staggered to his feet, blood on his lip. No. She is my wife. She stays with me. Foolish boy, another elder spat. Would you doom us all? This mansion has taken before, and it will take again. She is not a sacrifice. Omar roared, his voice raw. But the elders turned away. By dawn, we decide. That night, Omar and Tariq kept watch beside her. Layla slept, her breaths shallow, her face serene. But every so often her lips moved, whispering words in a language neither man understood. Omar stroked her hand, whispering fiercely. I will not let them take you. Do you hear me, Layla? Whatever this house wants, it cannot have you. But when her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dark, the voice that answered was not hers. Then you will fall with her. Sparkle's end of Chapter 7. Chapter 8, the ultimatum installment 1. The sun had not yet risen when the family gathered again in the main hall. The air was heavy with the scent of kerosene and damp stone, the windows beaded with dew. Outside, the first azan echoed faintly, calling the faithful to prayer. But inside the mansion, it was not devotion that filled the room, it was fear. The elders sat in a semicircle, their white beards catching the glow of the lanterns. Between them, a brass tray lay on the floor with cups of steaming tea. The women clustered near the back, whispering behind their dupattas, their eyes darting nervously toward the door that led to the bridal chamber. Tariq stood to one side, Quran pressed against his chest. Omar paced restlessly before the elders, his jaw clenched, his eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. The eldest elder finally spoke, his voice deep and unyielding. "This cannot continue. What we saw yesterday was no sickness. It was no hysteria. It was the jinn speaking through her." We all heard it. A ripple of agreement passed through the hall. One of the younger uncles added sharply, "If she remains, the mansion itself will not rest. The curse will spread." "She is my wife," Omar shot back, his voice raw. "She is not a curse. She is Layla." The elder's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Do you think Amin and Begum's husband did not say the same? Do you think the families before did not cling to their brides? But in the end, the house took them. This land remembers its bargain. Every 50 years, another bride is claimed." Omar's fists trembled. "Then I will break the bargain." Whispers erupted. One woman gasped audibly, as though the very words had invited punishment. Someone muttered Astaghfirullah. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Tariq stepped forward, his face stern. "Enough. This is not about bargains alone. This is about faith. If Allah wills, no jinn can claim what he protects." The imam, seated among the elders, nodded gravely. "True. But faith must be constant, unbroken. And the boy is right in one thing, we must fight, not surrender." The eldest elder raised his hand for silence. "Then we are divided. Half of us say she must be removed before the house takes us all. Half say she may be saved. We cannot delay the decision. By tonight, we must choose." Later, in the courtyard, the women gathered with their trays of breakfast. Paratha sizzled on the iron griddle, and the smell of ghee filled the air. Yet no one ate with appetite. The children were hushed, their mothers watching every shadow. Layla emerged from her chamber, her dupatta neatly draped, her steps graceful. At first glance, she looked every bit the bride she was meant to be. She smiled faintly at the women, greeting them softly. But when she lifted a paratha, the bread blackened in her hand, curling as though touched by flame. She dropped it with a gasp, her eyes wide. The women recoiled, whispering furiously. One crossed herself with trembling fingers. Layla's lips trembled. "It wasn't me," she whispered. "I swear it wasn't me." But her voice fractured, and for a heartbeat, another tone bled through. Hungry, the courtyard erupted in shrieks. Omar rushed to her side, shielding her with his body. "Enough. Stop staring at her like she is an animal." His voice broke, but his arms remained firm around her trembling frame. The women whispered still, their fear spilling like water, "She is taken. She is cursed. Send her away." Tariq strode forward, raising his voice above the clamor. "Enough. She is under my protection. Until we decide, no one will touch her." But as the family dispersed, Omar saw the looks, a mixture of pity and fear. And he knew pity was more dangerous. Pity meant they believed her fate was sealed. That afternoon, the imam led a session of ruqya in the main hall. Layla was seated in the center, her hands bound lightly with red thread, the Quran placed before her. The men sat in a circle, reciting verses, their voices weaving into a steady rhythm. The sound filled the hall, strong, resolute. At first, she sat quietly, her eyes lowered. Then her body stiffened. Her lips moved in silence, echoing words that clashed with the recitation. The air grew thick, the lantern flames stretching tall. Suddenly, her head snapped back, her eyes blazing red. The voices collided, Quranic verse against guttural growl, the room vibrating with the force. The red thread snapped like straw. She rose to her feet, her hair flying, her laughter sharp. "This house is mine. You cannot drive me out." The elders recoiled, some clutching their beads, others collapsing in fear. Omar leapt forward, grabbing her wrists. "No. You are Layla. Fight it." For a moment, her eyes softened. She whispered his name. Then the red flared brighter, and she flung him back with a strength that was not hers. The imam shouted louder, his voice trembling with exertion. The verses filled the air, battling her shrieks until, at last, she collapsed once more, her body limp. Silence fell. The elders looked at one another with pale faces. And Omar knew, the ultimatum was coming. Chapter 8, The Ultimatum Installment 2. By dusk, the mansion was quieter than a graveyard. The shadows lengthened across the courtyard, and even the servants moved in hushed steps, their eyes lowered. The family had been summoned again to the main hall, this time for the elders' verdict. The hall smelled of kerosene and dust. Mats were laid in a circle, and in the center stood a brass lantern, its flame flickering weakly. Men sat shoulder to shoulder on one side, women clustered on the other, their dupattas drawn low. Children had been sent away, this was not a gathering for innocent eyes. Omar stood apart, restless, his jaw set. He held prayer beads so tightly the string cut into his skin. Tariq remained beside him, his face calm but lined with fatigue. At last, the eldest elder cleared his throat. His voice carried the weight of decades. We have deliberated. We have prayed for guidance. And we have remembered what this mansion has shown us across generations. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. This bride is marked. She is claimed. What happened in the courtyard this morning, what we saw in the Ruqya this afternoon, no family can survive such things. The jinn will not relent. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. Some women nodded, others wept quietly. The elder raised his hand. Therefore, by the council's decision, she must be removed from this mansion before the next moon rises. If she remains, we all risk ruin. Omar's breath caught. His fists clenched so tight his nails cut into his palms. No. The word rang sharp in the silence. All eyes turned to him. She is my wife, he continued, his voice trembling with fury. You speak of her as if she is livestock, something to be sent away when it is inconvenient. But she is flesh, blood, soul. She is Layla. Do not be blind, son, another elder snapped. Would you risk the lives of every soul here for one woman? Have you forgotten Amin and Begum? Have you forgotten the three who came after her? Omar stepped forward, his eyes burning. I don't care about your ghosts. I care about my wife. And I will not abandon her. The Imam spoke softly, but his voice carried. Omar, faith demands courage, but also wisdom. Sometimes love blinds us to what must be done. Then let me be blind, Omar spat. I would rather be blind than faithless. The room erupted in whispers. One uncle muttered, he will doom us all. Another hissed, this is madness. But from the women's side came a different murmur, softer, uncertain. One of the younger wives whispered, but she looked afraid this morning, didn't she? Like something was hurting her. Another replied, yes. For a moment, she was just a girl. Pity flickered in the air, fragile as a candle flame. But fear drowned it quickly. The elders pressed on. By dawn, she must be taken to her parents' house in the village. If they cannot restrain her, then, the elders' eyes darkened. Then we do what must be done. The words hung like a blade. Omar's heart thundered. He saw it in their faces, exile at best, death at worst. His chest ached with rage, with helplessness. He turned to Tariq, his voice hoarse. Uncle, say something. They'll kill her. Tariq's gaze was steady, unreadable. At last he spoke. If you condemn her, you condemn yourselves. This mansion does not hunger for exile. It hungers for blood. Sending her away will not end this. It will only bring it back again, 50 years from now. The elders stiffened, unease rippling through them. They had no answer. At that moment, the lantern in the center of the hall flickered. The flame stretched tall, hissing. The brass tray rattled against the floor. Gasps filled the room. A wind swept through the hall, though the windows were closed. Dupatas lifted, papers scattered. The frescoed lions on the ceiling seemed to shimmer, their painted eyes glowing faintly. And then came the sound, a low moan, rising from the walls themselves. It grew louder, layered, as though dozens of voices wept in unison. Women screamed. Men clutched their beads. The imam's voice rose in frantic recitation. Omar's heart pounded. He knew, without doubt, the mansion had heard the verdict. And it was answering. The moan sharpened into a shriek. A window shattered, glass spraying across the mats. The lantern burst, its flame flaring into the air before dying. Darkness swallowed the hall, broken only by the pale glow of the moon through the jagged glass. In the chaos, the doors of the bridal chamber slammed open. Layla stood in the threshold. Her dupatta trailed behind her like torn wings, her hair wild, her eyes burning red. Her lips curved into a smile both tender and cruel. "Did you think you could decide without me?" The room froze. She stepped forward slowly, her bare feet silent on the marble. The shadows clung to her, thickening around her frame. The women shrank back, the men muttered prayers, but no one moved. Her gaze swept across them, lingering on Omar. For a heartbeat, he saw her true self flicker through, desperate, pleading. But then it was gone, replaced by the jinn's hunger. The eldest elder whispered hoarsely, "Astaghfirullah." Layla tilted her head, laughter spilling from her lips. "This mansion is mine. And so is every one of you." The walls shuddered. Dust rained from the beams. Somewhere above, a beam cracked loudly, groaning as though the house itself bowed to her claim. Omar lunged toward her, but Tariq seized his arm. "Not now. If you touch her now, it will take you too." The room shook harder. Screams echoed, children crying from distant quarters. And Layla, or what wore her face, spread her arms wide, her voice ringing with layered tones. "You will not send me away. You will not decide my fate. I am the fate of this house." The hall plunged into silence. Only the sound of their collective fear remained. Chapter 8, The Ultimatum Installment 3. The hall was suffocating. The air thickened until every breath felt like swallowing smoke. The elders sat rigid, their turbans trembling with each shiver of the walls. Women clutched their dupattas, whispering hurried supplication to God. Children's cries echoed faintly from distant rooms, muffled as mothers tried to soothe them. Layla stood in the center, her eyes burning red, her arms outstretched as though welcoming them into her dominion. Shadows clung to her like a second veil, rising and falling with her every breath. Omar felt his knees weaken. Part of him wanted to rush to her, to pull her back into his arms, to remind her of their love. But another part, the part that heard the layered voices slip from her throat, froze in dread. "Speak," one elder barked, though his voice trembled. "What are you?" Layla tilted her head, smiling faintly. "I am what you invited. I am what you fed for generations." Her tone shifted, lower, crueler. "I am the price of your mansion." Gasps rippled through the hall. Tariq's face hardened, his grip tightening on his Quran. "This is blasphemy," the imam declared, raising his voice in defiance. He began reciting again, his words sharp and steady. The sound filled the hall, a counterpoint to the jinn's growl. Layla hissed, her body jerking violently. The shadows writhed, the frescoed lions above seeming to roar as dust rained from the beams. Omar could bear it no longer. He pushed past Tariq, falling to his knees before her. "Layla, look at me. It's me, your husband. Fight it. Remember who you are." For a heartbeat, her eyes softened. Tears shimmered in them. "Omar," she whispered, her voice fragile. But then her lips twisted, and the red flared again. "She remembers, but I am stronger. She shoved him back with one hand. The force flung him across the hall, crashing into a pillar. Pain seared his shoulder, but he dragged himself up, refusing to retreat. The elders erupted in chaos. Some shouted for more recitation, others called for ropes, still others for exile. The women wailed, their voices mingling with the imam's verses. One uncle, braver, or more desperate, than the rest, surged forward with a length of rope. "We must bind her," he cried. "Before she kills us all." He threw the rope around her wrists, pulling tight. For a moment it seemed to hold. Then she laughed. The rope blackened in his hands, smoking, turning to ash that scattered across the floor. Her eyes flared red as she leaned close to him. "You cannot bind what binds you." The man shrieked, stumbling back. His beard smoldered faintly, the scent of singed hair filling the air. Tariq raised his voice above the din. "Listen to me. If we turn against her now, we invite our own destruction. The mansion feeds on fear. Do not give it what it wants." But the elders were past reason. "She must be removed," one shouted. "Tonight." Omar staggered forward, his voice raw with desperation. "No. If you send her away, you send her to death. I will not allow it." The eldest elder rose shakily to his feet, his face pale but resolute. "Then you will go with her. If you defy us, you are no longer of us. You are both cast out." The word slammed into Omar like a blow. Exile. The severing of blood and name. But he did not falter. "So be it," he spat. "Better exile with her than a coward's life without her." Gasps filled the hall. Some women began to weep, others muttered that he had gone mad. But Omar's voice did not waver. "She is my wife. And I will fight for her until my last breath." At that moment, the mansion itself seemed to respond. The portraits along the walls rattled in their frames. The painted bride's eyes glowed faintly, their mouths curving into smiles that were never painted there. The chained doors of the north wing clanged, the metal straining as though something pressed from within. The ground trembled. Cracks split the marble floor. The lantern swung wildly, casting monstrous shadows. Layla threw back her head, her laughter merging with the moans of the house. "Do you see? It has begun." Then came the scream. Not from Layla. From one of the uncles. He had stumbled too close to her shadow. It rose like smoke, wrapping around his neck. His hands clawed at it desperately, but no grip could break it. His face turned red, then purple. "Help him," someone cried. Several men lunged forward, pulling, striking, but their blows passed through the darkness like fists through water. The uncle's body convulsed, his eyes bulging. Then, with a final choking gasp, he collapsed to the floor. The shadow dissolved back into Layla, who stood serene once more, her smile faint. The hall erupted in chaos. Women shrieked, men shouted, the imam recited louder, Tariq forced himself between Omar and the body. The elders scrambled back, their verdict forgotten in the face of death. Omar knelt beside the fallen uncle, pressing his trembling fingers to the man's throat. No pulse. No breath. Only silence. He looked up at his wife, at the creature wearing her face, and his heart shattered. Layla whispered softly, almost lovingly, one by one. The hall dissolved into panic. Families rushed to their quarters, slamming doors. The imam ordered constant recitation. The elders huddled, their authority crumbling. Omar remained on the floor, cradling his uncle's lifeless body, tears streaming down his face. Tariq placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice heavy. "This is only the beginning." Omar lifted his head, his eyes blazing. "Then let it begin with me. I will not leave her. I will not run. If the mansion wants a fight, it has found one." But even as he spoke, the walls shuddered again, and from the chained north wing came the sound of laughter, dozens of voices, layered, mocking. The mansion had claimed its first victim. And it was hungry for more. Sparkle's end of Chapter 8. Chapter 9, The Bridegroom's Defiance Installment 1. The mansion was no longer a home. It was a siege. After the death in the hall, panic spread like fire. Servants fled before dawn, whispering prayers as they vanished down the narrow lanes toward the village. Cousins and uncles packed their belongings, muttering excuses of work in Lahore, anything to escape the walls that now groaned with whispers. The great house, once bustling with wedding laughter, stood hollow, its arches echoing with absence. Omar remained. He could not leave. Not while Layla lay bound in the bridal chamber, her breaths shallow, her skin clammy beneath the touch of his hand. At times she was herself, eyes wide with fear, fingers clutching his, whispering his name. At others, she shifted into something unrecognizable, her smile stretching too wide, her voice layered with tones that did not belong to her. He never knew which Layla he would wake to. In the courtyard, Tariq sat on a charpoy, Quran open before him. His recitation echoed steadily, filling the air with rhythm, though his voice was ragged with exhaustion. "They are abandoning us," Omar said bitterly, pacing. "Cowards. They are afraid," Tariq replied without looking up. "Fear turns men into cowards. But sometimes it also turns men into survivors. Survivors who leave her to die." Omar's voice cracked. "They think exile will save them. But you know as well as I do, this mansion will not be satisfied with her absence." Tariq lifted his gaze, his eyes sharp. "Then what will you do?" Omar's fists clenched. "I will fight it." "How?" "I don't know. But I will not let her go." That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Omar slipped into the northern wing's corridor. The chained doors groaned faintly, the metal cold beneath his fingers. He felt the weight of the portrait staring down, the brides who had come before, their painted smiles brittle, their eyes too alive. He searched the walls, running his hands over the cracked plaster. Tariq had once told him of a hidden archive, records kept by his grandfather, a man who had battled whispers in his own time. His fingers caught on a notch behind a fading tapestry. He pulled, and a panel shifted. Dust billowed into the air. Behind it lay a narrow cavity filled with scrolls, leather-bound notebooks, brittle papers eaten by moths. He pulled them free, coughing, his heart racing. That night, by the light of a single lamp, he pored over them. The handwriting was spidery, Urdu script fading with age. He pieced together fragments, mentions of Amin Begum, the bride who vanished. Descriptions of women hearing anklets at night. Notes of animals panicking before weddings. Drawings of symbols scratched into the mansion's stones, wards, some broken. One passage froze him, every 50 years, the house demands its bride. If resisted, it takes blood from all. If appeased, it sleeps again. Omar's jaw tightened. "No. I won't feed it." Meanwhile, in the chamber, Layla stirred. He rushed to her, clutching her hand. For a moment, her eyes were soft, wet with tears. "Omar," she whispered, her voice her own. His chest loosened. "I'm here, love. I found something. Maybe there's a way." But her grip tightened painfully, her nails digging into his skin. Her smile curved cruelly. "You cannot fight the house," the guttural voice hissed. "The house is older than you, older than faith." He yanked his hand free, trembling. "Then it will learn fear of me." Layla laughed, the sound low and sharp. "Brave boy. Foolish boy. I will break you first." Her body convulsed, and she collapsed back onto the charpoy, unconscious again. Omar pressed his forehead into his hands, his tears hot. "I will not let you go. Even if it kills me." From the corridor came the faint sound of anklets, circling closer. Chapter 9, The bridegroom's defiance installment 2. The manuscripts smelled of dust and rot, their edges brittle, their ink faded like old wounds. Omar spread them across the low table, weighing the corners with brass candlesticks so they wouldn't curl. The lamplight flickered over the spidery Urdu script, words written by hands long turned to bone. He read aloud, his lips shaping the phrases carefully, Rat ko gar bolta hai. At night the house speaks. The next line was darker, Jo suntai hain, unka dimak kabi wapis nahi ada. Those who listen never get their mind back. His hands trembled. He shuffled to another page, where a crude sketch showed a veiled bride, her head bent, her anklets drawn like chains. Beneath it, Dulhan jin ka wada hai. The bride is promised to the jinn. The words blurred before his eyes. He forced himself to keep reading, though every sentence pressed like a stone on his chest. A cough came from the doorway. Tariq stood there, framed in shadow, his Quran tucked beneath his arm. His gaze fell on the scattered manuscripts. "You found them," he said flatly. Omar looked up, startled. "You knew. I told you my grandfather left records. I prayed you would never need them." He stepped inside, his sandals brushing the marble. "These papers are poison, son. They feed the obsession. The more you read, the more the house roots itself in you." "I don't care," Omar snapped. "If they hold even one clue, I must use it. I cannot sit idle while she slips further." Tariq's expression hardened. "And if the clue demands a sacrifice? Will you spill another's blood to save her? Or your own?" Omar's throat tightened, but he did not answer. Later, as dawn crept pale across the sky, they gathered in the courtyard for breakfast. A few relatives remained, Aunt Shireen, 2 cousins too afraid to travel in the night, an elderly aunt who muttered Quranic verses under her breath. The food was laid out, steaming parathas, bowls of yogurt, a clay pot of dud patty, milk tea, but no one reached for it. Layla sat among them, her dupatta neat, her smile faint. For a time, she looked almost ordinary, her eyes lowered as she traced circles on the edge of her plate. Then a fly landed on her hand. She did not brush it away. Instead, her eyes narrowed, and the fly convulsed, falling dead to the table. The women gasped. One crossed herself. Another dragged her child away, whispering Bismillah, in the name of God. Layla tilted her head, her smile curving wider. "Why waste fear on a fly?" she said softly. But her voice carried an undertone that silenced the courtyard. Omar slammed his fist against the table, his voice trembling. "Enough. She is not to be feared." But even as he spoke, he saw it, the faint red shimmer in her eyes, the glint of satisfaction. That night, he returned to the manuscripts. Tariq joined him reluctantly, unwilling to leave him alone with the texts. Together they read fragments aloud, 50 years. Ek Dulhan, Ek Kurbani. Agar Dulhan na mile, To kun liya jada hai. 50 years. One bride, one sacrifice. If the bride is not given, blood is taken. Omar slammed the book shut. So that's it. A bargain. A filthy, ancient bargain. They fed it with brides so it would sleep. Tariq's face was grim. And now it has woken again. Because you brought her here. Omar's head snapped up. You think this is my fault? I think love blinds us, Tariq said quietly. Perhaps you should have left the mansion empty, sold it, let it rot. But the moment you crossed the threshold with her, the house remembered. Omar's hands shook as he raked them through his hair. Then I will unmake the bargain. If they fed it with brides, I will starve it. Starving a jinn is like starving fire, Tariq muttered. It only burns hotter. The next day brought another incident. Layla walked through the veranda, her anklets chiming softly. Servants who lingered near the courtyard dropped their trays and fled, muttering hurried prayers. She paused beneath one of the portraits, Aminan Begum, the vanished bride. The painting's eyes seemed to glisten, as though alive. Layla touched the frame lightly. "She still cries," she whispered. Omar stiffened. "Who cries?" Layla turned, her eyes flashing red. "The ones who never left." Her laughter rang through the veranda, echoing too long, as if the walls repeated it. That evening, Tariq confronted Omar again. "Son, you cannot keep denying this. Every day she changes more. Soon there will be nothing left of her." Omar's voice was hoarse from sleepless nights. "Then I will follow her into the darkness if I must. But I will not abandon her." Tariq sighed, placing a weathered hand on his shoulder. "Your love is fierce. Fiercer than most men's faith. But love without wisdom can destroy. Remember that." Omar's jaw set. "Then let it destroy me. But not her." The night fell heavy. The mansion creaked as if settling deeper into the earth. Omar spread the manuscripts before him once more, candlelight flickering across the faded ink. One final line caught his eye, scrawled in hurried strokes, as if the writer had been pressed for time: "Jo dulhan keo wapas chata hai, yuse gar keo tadna haga. Lekin har pathar kun manj ga." He who wants the bride back must break the house. But every stone will demand blood. Omar stared at the words until his eyes burned. His decision solidified like iron. If the house itself was the prison, then he would tear it down. Even if it cost him his life. From the bridal chamber, Layla's laughter drifted down the hall, low and layered, as though mocking his resolve. Chapter 9, The Bridegroom's Defiance Installment 3. The mansion did not sleep that night. The wind keened through the arches, rattling the iron grills, carrying with it the faint sound of anklets that never drew closer, never receded. The courtyard lamps sputtered, their flames stretching tall, then dying to embers, as though the house breathed with them. Omar could not rest. He gathered what he could find: a rusted hammer from the servant's shed, a lantern filled with kerosene, a pouch of salt borrowed from the kitchen. He tucked the manuscripts beneath his arm, their brittle pages heavy with warnings. Tariq found him kneeling by the courtyard fountain, muttering prayers as he lined the stone rim with salt. "You mean to fight the mansion with kitchen spices?" he asked, his tone sharp but not mocking. "I will use whatever I can," Omar said, his jaw clenched. "If faith alone won't drive it out, then faith and defiance together will." Tariq sighed deeply. "Faith is not a tool, son. It is a shield. But if you raise it like a sword, you may strike yourself instead." "Then let it strike me," Omar whispered. "Better me than her." Inside the bridal chamber, Layla stirred. Omar rushed to her side. Her eyes fluttered open, soft brown once more. She reached for him weakly, her hand trembling. "Omar, don't leave me." His chest loosened. He kissed her fingers. "Never. I swear it." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "It hurts, like fire in my veins. Sometimes I hear myself screaming, but no one hears it outside. Only me." Omar's throat tightened. "I hear you, love. I will always hear you. Whatever it takes, I will bring you back." Her lips quivered into a faint smile. For a fleeting moment, she was his Layla again, fragile, frightened, human. Then her expression hardened. Her smile stretched cruelly. Her eyes flared red. "Bring her back," the guttural voice hissed. "She is already mine. And the more you fight, the deeper she sinks." Omar recoiled, tears stinging his eyes. But he gritted his teeth. "Then I will follow her into the depths. And drag her out." Layla laughed, a sound sharp as broken glass. Then she slumped back against the pillow, unconscious once more. In the morning, whispers filled the veranda. Aunt Shireen sat with the two remaining cousins, their cups of tea untouched. "They say he roams the halls at night," one cousin murmured. Hammer in one hand, salt in the other, like a madman. He will die for her, the other replied, shaking her head. And then what? The mansion will still demand another. Shireen hushed them sharply. Do not speak so. If he has the courage to fight, then we should pray he succeeds. Better his defiance than our fear. But even she looked toward the bridal chamber with haunted eyes. That afternoon, Omar spread the manuscripts across the floor again. He marked the drawings of the mansion's foundation, crude, uneven sketches, but enough to show that the north wing was its heart. He circled the lines with ink, muttering to himself. Break the heart, break the bargain. Tariq entered silently, watching him. At last he said, You plan to tear down the north wing? Alone? If I must. It will kill you before you swing the hammer twice. Then I die swinging. Tariq stepped closer, his voice heavy with sorrow. Son, courage without wisdom is not bravery. It is suicide. But, he hesitated. If you must do this, then do not do it alone. At least let me stand beside you. Omar's eyes burned with gratitude. Uncle, but Tariq raised his hand. Do not thank me yet. If we fail, both our graves will lie in this courtyard. That night, as the azan for Isha faded, Omar returned to the bridal chamber. He sat beside Layla, brushing her hair back from her face. You once told me you dreamed of Lahore, he whispered. Of walking near Anarkali Bazaar, of eating kulfi in the summer heat. Do you remember? Her lips moved faintly. Yes, she whispered. For a moment, her eyes glistened with recognition. Omar smiled through his tears. Then hold on to that. Hold on to me. I will get you out. Her breath quickened. Her fingers clutched his. Then, suddenly, her eyes snapped open, blazing red. You cannot take what is bound, the layered voice hissed. The bazaar, the kulfi, the streets, all ashes in her mind now. Only I remain. Omar's heart twisted. But he leaned closer, his voice steady. Then I will burn with her, and rise from the ashes together. Layla's laughter rang sharp, echoing through the mansion. Later, Omar walked alone through the deserted corridors. He spoke aloud, not to himself but to the house. You hear me, don't you? He said, his voice raw. You think you own her. You think you own us all. But I will tear you stone by stone if I must. You will not take her from me. The walls groaned. The chandeliers swayed though no wind blew. From the north wing came a faint chuckle, low and mocking. Omar clenched his fists. Do your worst. I will not yield. Back in the chamber, Layla stirred again. This time, she sat upright on her own, her eyes wide, her breathing steady. Omar rushed to her side, relief flooding him. Layla. You're awake. She smiled faintly. For a moment, she was his again. Omar. I'm so tired. But I saw something. His pulse quickened. What did you see? Her voice lowered, trembling. It's not just me it wants. It wants you too. It says, it cannot feed fully unless the groom joins the bride. Omar's chest tightened. No. That will never happen. Her hand clutched his arm desperately. Promise me. Promise me you won't let it take you. He kissed her hand fiercely. I promise. But I will fight until my last breath. Her eyes flickered red for a split second. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. Then your last breath will come sooner than you think. Sparkle's end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10, The Breaking Point expanded installment 1. The mansion no longer whispered. It roared in silence. Every corner of the house felt swollen with unseen breath, as if the very walls inhaled and exhaled in rhythm with the night. The courtyard, once a place of laughter, now echoed only with the rustle of neem branches and the faint clink of abandoned utensils left on trays. Servants had long fled, their quarters empty, their charpoys overturned. The relatives who lingered moved like shadows, whispering supplication to God into their palms, avoiding the north wing as though even their eyes might be claimed. And always, always, came the sound of anklets. Tariq rose slowly, his joints cracking, his beard catching the lamplight. Love makes men brave. But it also makes them foolish. Even the prophet warned that courage without wisdom is ruin. Then let it ruin me, Omar said hoarsely. But it will not take her. Before he moved toward the wing, Omar went to Layla. She lay beneath a quilt, her breathing shallow, her face pale as ivory. For a moment, in the soft glow of the lantern, she looked simply ill, a young bride struck by fever, nothing more. He brushed the hair back from her brow, his thumb tracing the delicate arch of her cheek. Layla, he whispered, kneeling close. Tonight, I fight for you. Tonight, I take you back. Her lashes fluttered. Her eyes opened, brown and soft, glistening with unshed tears. She raised a trembling hand to his wrist. Omar, don't go. The house is waiting. It wants you too. I know, he said softly, pressing his lips to her hand. But let it want. It will not have me. You are mine. A tear slid down her cheek. If you open that door, it won't be me you find. Promise me you'll still remember who I am. His throat burned. He kissed her hand again. I will. Always. For a heartbeat, her smile was tender. His Layla, fragile and afraid. Then her grip tightened painfully. Her nails dug into his skin. Her lips stretched too wide, her eyes flaring crimson. Then remember me screaming. Her laugh split the air, jagged, cruel, layered with a tone not hers. Omar recoiled, heart pounding, bile rising. Before he could speak, her body convulsed, and she slumped unconscious again, the quilt rising and falling with her shallow breaths. Tariq's voice came from the doorway, steady and grave. It is time. The moon was high as they crossed the courtyard, its pale light painting the stones silver. The neem tree loomed, its branches creaking though the air was still. Omar carried the lantern in one hand, the hammer in the other. Salt pouches clinked at his belt. The north wing rose before them, chained, sealed, forbidden for decades. Its doors were carved with Quranic verses, once sharp and proud, now gouged and faded as though claws had scraped them away. The iron chain rattled softly, though no wind stirred. The air grew colder with each step. Their breath clouded in front of them, white mist curling into the moonlight. Omar's chest tightened, but he pressed on, Tariq at his side, reciting verses under his breath. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. The words seemed to tremble in the air, like fragile thread stretched against a storm. Omar set the lantern on the stone and lifted the hammer. His hands shook, but he steadied them with a prayer under his breath. The first strike rang like thunder, echoing across the mansion. The chain quivered but held. The second strike split the wood slightly, dust puffing into the cold air. From within came a low moan, like breath drawn through hollow lungs. Omar gritted his teeth. He raised the hammer again. The third strike snapped the lock. The chain clattered to the marble, its sound sharp as a scream. The doors shuddered but did not open. For a moment, silence held. Then the anklets chimed, faint at first, then louder, circling them like a predator unseen. Tariq's voice rose louder, Quranic verse clashing with the moan that seeped from the blackness. Omar snatched up the lantern, holding it high. The doors groaned. And then they swung inward. A blast of air spilled out, colder than winter, smelling of rot, incense, and iron. The lantern's flame flickered violently. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with portraits of brides. All wore veils, all stood stiff, and all had eyes that glistened faintly, as though alive. Their gazes followed as the men stepped forward. Omar's chest clenched. His hammer felt suddenly small in his hand. "We end it tonight," he whispered. The anklets chimed again, closer now. From behind them came a scream. "Layla!" Her voice tore through the mansion, raw, anguished, inhuman. It seemed to echo from every wall, every stone, as though the house itself screamed with her. Omar spun toward the courtyard, his heart seizing. "Layla!" The doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the dark. Chapter 10, The Breaking Point Installment 2. The slam reverberated like a cannon, shaking the dust from the rafters. The chain clattered to the marble once more, but the doors sealed shut as if welded by unseen hands. Omar spun, hammer raised, his breath jagged. "Layla!" he shouted into the suffocating dark. His voice bounced down the corridor, thin and useless. Tariq's voice rose, loud and fierce, "Audu billahi min ash-shaytan ir rajim. I seek refuge with God from the accursed devil." The Quranic verse rolled like thunder, clashing with the whisper that slithered along the walls. The lantern flame sputtered. For a heartbeat, it went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The air thickened, pressing against their lungs. Omar fumbled with the flint, his hands trembling. Sparks danced, then finally caught, the lantern sputtering back to life. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with portraits, each one of a veiled bride. But the paintings had changed. The veils had slipped. The eyes beneath were exposed, gleaming faintly red. Some portraits smiled, their lips curling too wide. Others wept black streaks that dripped down the canvas and onto the floor. Tariq's breath hissed. "Oh God, they are not paintings anymore." Omar gritted his teeth, gripping the hammer. "They are not her." He forced himself forward, his sandals scuffing the marble. The portrait's eyes followed, heads tilting slightly, as though tracking prey. The sound of anklets chimed with each step, circling them but never revealing a source. Layla's scream echoed again, ripping through the walls. This time it carried words, fractured but clear, "Omar. Don't," her voice cut into a guttural growl. "Leave him. He is mine." Omar's chest clenched. He surged forward, the hammer raised. "I'm coming, Layla." The corridor seemed to stretch, the doors at the end receding, the floor beneath them tilting. His feet dragged as though the marble had turned to tar. The portraits leaned forward, their painted hands pressing against the frames, straining to step free. One bride's veil fluttered as though stirred by breath. A skeletal hand pushed through the canvas, reaching for his throat. Tariq barked a verse, his voice sharp as fire, "Kul Audu by Rabbil Falak, I seek refuge with the Lord of the Dawn." The hand recoiled, the canvas shriveling back to flat paint. But the others stirred restlessly, their whispers overlapping like a hive. The lantern light wavered. Shadows thickened, rising from the floor like smoke. They coiled around Omar's legs, cold and wet, seeping into his skin. His knees buckled. "Omar!" Tariq cried, flinging salt from a pouch. The crystals hissed as they struck the shadows, sizzling like oil on flame. The coils loosened, retreating with a hiss. Omar gasped for air, his hammer slipping but catching on his calloused palm. "It's fighting us. The whole house." Tariq's eyes blazed. "Then fight harder. If you stop now, she is lost." They pressed forward, step by grinding step. The lantern illuminated carved arches, each marked with scratches that looked like Urdu letters but broken, twisted, almost illegible. Omar squinted. "These symbols, they're not prayers." Tariq leaned closer, his face pale. "They are the opposite. Inverted verses. Mockery." Omar's grip tightened on the hammer. Rage burned through his fear. "Then I will smash every one of them." He swung the hammer at the nearest arch. The blow cracked stone, sending shards flying. The twisted symbols fractured. The air shuddered, the whispering momentarily silenced. The anklets chimed again, angry this time. Layla's voice came, broken and layered, "Stop, Omar. Stop. You're hurting me." He froze, chest heaving. Tariq's hand clamped his shoulder. "That is not her voice. That is the jinn wearing her tongue. Do not listen." Omar squeezed his eyes shut. His heart screamed to run to her, to stop the madness. But his mind clung to Tariq's warning. He raised the hammer again. Another swing. Another crack. Another scream, not Layla's, but dozens of voices shrieking from the walls. The mansion trembled. They reached the end of the corridor at last, where a single door loomed. Unlike the others, it was plain wood, uncarved, unmarked. Yet it radiated menace, the grain darkened as though soaked with centuries of blood. The anklet stopped. Silence reigned. Omar lifted the lantern, his face glistening with sweat. "She's inside." Tariq's voice dropped low. "Or what has claimed her is." Omar raised the hammer, his knuckles white. Before he could swing, the door shuddered. From within came the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, too large for a human chest. Then came Layla's voice, clear and human, filled with terror. "Omar, don't open it. Please, it's not me anymore." Omar staggered back, his hammer shaking. His throat closed with grief. "Layla," Tariq's voice was iron. "Do not listen. This is the final trap." Omar's tears burned his eyes. His love battled his terror. Then he roared, lifting the hammer high. "If you want me, take me, but you will not keep her." He swung. The door splintered, wood cracking. A gust of icy air blasted them, snuffing the lantern. Darkness swallowed them whole again. And from the blackness came laughter, not Layla's, not the jinn's, but dozens of brides, all laughing together. Chapter 10, The Breaking Point Installment 3. The laughter rattled the chamber until Omar thought his skull might split. It came from every wall, from the ceiling, from the cracked stones beneath his sandals. The hammer slipped from his hand and clanged to the floor, echoing like a gong. He groped blindly for the lantern, but the air itself seemed to choke the flame. The only light was faint, a sickly glow oozing from symbols scratched into the far walls. Their shapes writhed, like letters half-formed and half-broken, pulling against themselves. Tariq's voice rose in the dark, loud and desperate, "Allahu la ilaha illa huwa, al-hayyul qayyum." The verses rang like fire, and for a moment the laughter faltered. Omar seized the chance, fumbling forward, his hands scraping stone until they found the splintered edge of the door. He pulled himself inside. The stench struck him first, damp rot, iron, and incense burned long ago. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw them. Rows of garments hung along the walls. Bridal dupattas, yellowed with age, some stiff with dried blood. Anklets and bangles lay scattered in heaps, their silver dulled, some twisted as though crushed by unseen hands. Portraits leaned against the corners, faces half-painted, half-scorched. And in the center stood a dais of black stone. Upon it lay a quilt, folded carefully, as though awaiting another bride. Omar's stomach churned. He staggered forward, bile rising in his throat. "Oh God!" Tariq joined him, his face ashen, his Quran clutched tightly. This is where they kept them. All of them. The brides before. Omar's knees buckled. His hand brushed against a dupatta. It crumbled into dust at his touch. Then came the sound, slow, deliberate, familiar. Anklets. Omar lifted his head. From the darkness at the far end of the chamber, a figure emerged. Layla. Her dupatta trailed behind her, pristine, untouched by dust. Her face was veiled, her movements graceful, her form as beautiful as the night they wed. For a moment, Omar's heart leapt, his bride, whole, alive, his. "Layla," his voice broke. He stumbled toward her. She lifted her veil. Her eyes burned red. Her smile stretched wide. And her voice, layered with dozens, echoed, "You came." Omar froze. Tariq shouted verses, his voice cracking with force. The figure flinched but did not vanish. It stepped closer, the anklets chiming louder, sharper, until the sound drilled into their skulls. Suddenly, Layla's form fractured. For a heartbeat, Omar saw her true self, eyes wet with tears, lips trembling. "Omar, help me," then the red flared again. Her head jerked violently, her smile grotesque. Her voice dropped into a guttural growl. "She belongs here." As they all did. "And soon, so will you." The garments along the walls stirred. Dupattas lifted as though caught in wind, anklets rattled, bangles clinked. The relics of past brides rose like specters, swirling in the air. Omar snatched the hammer from the floor, his hand blistering from the cold metal. "You cannot have her," he roared. He swung at the dais. The blow cracked the stone, sending a fissure across its surface. The chamber screamed. The walls shuddered, dust pouring down in thick clouds. The relics whipped into a frenzy, wrapping around Omar's arms, dragging him backward. He fought, swinging wildly, smashing dupattas, shattering bangles, crushing anklets beneath the hammer. Each blow unleashed another shriek from the walls. Tariq hurled salt across the floor, chanting furiously. The crystals glowed faintly, hissing against the stone, forcing the shadows to recoil. Layla, or the thing that wore her, staggered, torn between forms. One moment she was his bride, crying his name. The next she was the jinn, her eyes burning, her voice promising ruin. "Choose, Omar," she screamed in both voices at once. "Choose me, or lose me." He fell to his knees, his chest heaving. "I will never lose you." The hammer slipped from his grip, clattering against the stone. His hands pressed to the fissure on the dais, prying, tearing, blood spilling as the sharp edges cut his palms. The stone groaned. Cracks split wider. From beneath came a roar, not human, not earthly. The chamber shook violently. The portraits of brides crashed from the walls, their painted eyes glowing before shattering into shards. The garments burst into flame, the bangles melting into silver pools. Layla collapsed to the floor, writhing, her body convulsing. Her eyes flickered brown, then red, then brown again. She screamed his name, then cursed it, her voice breaking. Omar lunged to her, dragging her into his arms. "I've got you. I've got you." Her hands clawed at his chest, her nails drawing blood. Her face twisted, half hers, half monstrous. "If you break it, you break me." Tariq seized Omar's arm, shouting over the chaos. "This is the choice, son. The house is bound to her now. If you destroy its heart, it may destroy her too." Omar's vision blurred with tears. His chest convulsed with anguish. He looked down at his wife, at the woman he loved and the monster she had become. Her lips trembled, her eyes flickering soft for one last second. "Save me," then the red blazed again. "Or bury me." The fissure in the dais split open with a deafening crack. A black wind blasted from it, tearing through the chamber, snuffing the lantern, tossing them against the walls. Omar clutched Layla tighter, his body shielding hers from the flying debris. The roar from beneath deepened, shaking the earth itself. The mansion wailed in chorus, its stones groaning, its arches splitting. And from the fissure, something began to rise. A hand. Long, skeletal, dripping with shadows. Another followed, clawing at the edges of the stone. The true heart of the jinn had awoken. Tariq's voice broke into a sobbing shout of verses. Salt scattered across the floor, glowing briefly before being sucked into the darkness. Omar's hammer lay just out of reach, glinting faintly in the chaos. Layla writhed in his arms, torn between bride and beast. Her screams tore at his soul. The hand clawed higher. The roar filled his skull. The mansion's portraits and walls split, dust pouring, beams groaning. And Omar realized he had seconds to choose. Save her. Destroy it. Or fall with both. Sparkle's end of Chapter 10. Chapter 11, The Heart of the Jinn Installment 1. The fissure split the dais wide open, a jagged wound in the heart of the mansion. From its depths poured a black wind that smelled of damp rot and burnt incense. It stung the eyes, burned the throat, and carried with it 1,000 whispers, some wailing, some laughing, some chanting in tongues Omar had never heard. The lantern's flame sputtered once, then died. Darkness closed around them. Omar clutched Layla tightly, her body thrashing in his arms. Her nails clawed at his chest, drawing blood. Her eyes flickered brown, then red, then brown again, like a candle on the edge of extinguishing. Layla, stay with me, he cried, his voice hoarse. She gasped, for a heartbeat herself again. Omar, you shouldn't have come. His throat burned with grief. I will never leave you. Her lips quivered, forming his name once more, and then her face twisted, eyes blazing crimson, her voice deepening into a guttural growl. Then you will never leave me either. The fissure roared. From its depths, something clawed upward. The first hand emerged, skeletal, black as obsidian, tendons made of smoke. Its fingers scraped deep grooves into the stone as it hauled itself higher. The second hand followed, its claws gouging furrows in the dais. Then came the head. It did not settle into a single form. One moment it was a horned skull, the next a veiled bride's face, the next an eyeless void. Its features melted and reformed endlessly, as though no human mind could look upon its true face. When it spoke, its voice was worse than its shifting form. Layered, fractured, echoing, it rattled Omar's ribs and pressed against his lungs until he thought he might choke. You broke the seal. The words vibrated through the chamber, through his bones, through the very air. Tariq's voice rose desperately, verses thundering, Kul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, Lam yalid walam yulad. The Quranic recitation rang out sharp, sparks against the darkness. For a heartbeat, the jinn faltered. The laughter dimmed. But then it surged again, its shifting head tilting mockingly. You recite as though these walls do not belong to me. But this is my masjid now. My qibla. My prayer. The mansion shuddered. The portraits along the corridor outside burst, their glass shattering. Canvases screamed as they tore, voices of brides echoing through the halls. Omar's grip tightened on Layla. She convulsed in his arms, her cries ripping through him. Omar, let me go, she gasped, her own voice breaking through. It will take you too. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears burning his eyes. Never. I will not let it. For one aching moment, she smiled softly, tender as the night they wed. Then her mouth twisted cruel, her eyes blazing red. Then I will drag you with me. The jinn hauled more of its body free. A ribcage made of shadow rose, its form swelling until it nearly touched the rafters. Its breath came in gusts of ash and heat, searing Omar's face. It pointed one claw at him. You carry her. You carry me. The fissure widened at its command. Symbols carved into the floor ignited with sickly red light, glowing like fire. They formed a circle around the dais, enclosing Omar and Layla in its grasp. The salt Tariq had scattered hissed, flared briefly, then vanished, consumed by the glow. Omar's chest seized. He raised the hammer, his knuckles white. You will not take her. The jinn tilted its ever-shifting head. For a moment, it wore Layla's face, her brown eyes wet with tears. Her voice came, soft, pleading, Omar, please, let me go before it's too late. His hand faltered. His hammer shook. His heart screamed to obey. Tariq's shout cut through the roar, "Do not listen. It speaks with her tongue, not her soul." The jinn laughed again, the sound shattering plaster from the walls. Beams splintered, marble cracked, dust billowed like smoke. The portraits exploded in showers of glass and canvas, brides screaming as they vanished. Tariq stood firm, his voice hoarse, verses pouring from him like fire. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. The jinn raised a clawed hand, its shadow stretching across the chamber like a noose. "Then your blood will write the next bargain." The claw descended. Omar lifted the hammer again, his heart hammering in his chest. Layla screamed, her voice fractured into a dozen tones. The fissure pulled at them all, the circle of glowing symbols flaring brighter. And for a breathless instant, Omar realized the truth. He was no longer just fighting for Layla. He was fighting for every bride the mansion had ever swallowed. And the mansion would not let him win. Chapter 11, The Heart of the Jinn Installment 2. The claw swept down like a blade of shadow, slicing through the air with a roar. Omar raised the hammer, bracing himself. The blow struck, the shock surging up his arms, numbing his bones. He staggered, his knees buckling, but he did not fall. Sparks flew as the hammer met the jinn's talon, sparks not of fire, but of light, brief and searing like lightning. The jinn shrieked, its form fracturing into shifting faces, skull, bride, void, horned beast, each flickering faster, each screaming in layered tones. Tariq stumbled, his voice shaking but unbroken. La ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lah. There is no God but Allah and without any partner. The words tore from his throat, ragged and raw, yet they cut through the cacophony like steel. The jinn reeled back, the claw smoking where hammer and verse had met. But its laughter surged again, deeper, crueler. "You think faith burns me? It feeds me. Every verse you shout is a memory of the brides you failed." The chamber responded. The relics swirled into frenzy, dupattas wrapping around Omar's neck, bangles clinking into chains that dragged at his wrists, anklets tightening like manacles on his ankles. He fought, thrashing wildly, swinging the hammer in wide arcs. Fabric tore, silver shattered, shards flying into the air. But each piece reformed, stronger, angrier. Layla screamed in his arms. Her body twisted unnaturally, her back arching until it seemed her spine would snap. Her mouth opened too wide, her voice splitting into a chorus of brides. "We are all yours, Omar. We are all waiting." Her face flickered through theirs, Amin Begum, the vanished bride, nameless veiled women, wide-eyed girls whose names had been lost. Each visage begged, cursed, laughed. Omar's vision blurred with tears. "No. I want only her." He slammed the hammer down onto the fissure again. Stone splintered further, the glow flaring. The chamber wailed as though alive, its cries reverberating through every beam and wall of the mansion. The jinn struck back. Its claw lashed out, catching Omar's chest. He flew across the chamber, slamming into the wall, his ribs burning with pain. Blood filled his mouth. The hammer skittered across the floor, out of reach. Layla lay writhing on the dais, her eyes alternating brown and crimson, her body contorting as though torn between two masters. "Omar," she whimpered, her true voice faint. "Please, don't let it win." Then her lips twisted, the guttural tones surging back. "But it is me, Omar. It has always been me. The bride was mine before she was yours." Omar dragged himself up, his palms scraping stone, his blood leaving streaks. His breath came in ragged gasps. "You lie." The jinn's head shifted, wearing Layla's face again. Tears welled in its borrowed eyes. "Do I?" For a heartbeat, he faltered. Tariq's shout cut the spell, "Allahu Akbar." The words crashed like thunder. The relic storm froze, suspended midair, trembling. "You must strike not with rage, but with love." The jinn's laughter rattled the chamber, mocking, cruel. Love is my feast. Strike with it, and I will swallow you whole. Omar gripped the hammer, blood dripping from his knuckles. His tears blurred his vision, but his resolve hardened. He turned back to Layla, who lay on the dais, torn between bride and beast. Her eyes met his, for a flicker, soft and human, pleading. Omar, he stepped toward her, hammer raised, whispering. Then love will burn you. The fissure flared, the black wind shrieking. The jinn lunged, its claws sweeping, its form towering, shifting faster than eyes could follow. Brides' voices filled the chamber, wailing, begging, cursing. Omar roared, swinging the hammer down with all his strength. The blow cracked the dais to its core. The fissure screamed, the glow blinding, the jinn recoiling with a roar that shook the heavens. The mansion convulsed. And in the chaos, Layla's voice rose, clear and human, breaking through the chorus for the first time. Omar, don't stop. Sparkle's End of Installment 2 Chapter 11, The Heart of the Jinn Installment 3 The fissure screamed like a living thing. The air seared Omar's lungs, filling him with ash and fire. His hammer dripped with dust and blood, his hands raw from the grip. Still, he raised it again, his wife's voice echoing in his skull. Omar, don't stop. Her cry cut through the roar, through the jinn's chorus of brides, through the mansion's moan. It was her voice, not the jinn's. Pure. Human. His Layla. He swung again. The dais split further, cracks spidering across its surface. A gust of black wind blasted outward, hurling him back. He slammed into the wall, his bones rattling, but he dragged himself upright, hammer still in hand. The jinn towered above them now, its form swelling until it filled the chamber. Faces rippled across its body, brides, skulls, beasts, veiled women. They screamed, laughed, cursed, wept, 1,000 voices overlapping. Its claws slashed through the air, gouging the stone, each strike shaking the mansion. You think you can break me with stone? It thundered. I am not in the dais. I am in her. I am in you. Tariq staggered forward, Quran clutched to his chest, his voice raw. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa, al-hayyul qayyum, the words rang, breaking through the cacophony. His body shook, his knees buckled, but he stood firm, his beard matted with sweat. The jinn recoiled briefly, its form fracturing. But then its laughter surged again, cruel and booming. Old man, your words are embers against the sea. Watch them drown. Shadows rose from the fissure, coiling like serpents. They lashed out, wrapping Tariq's arms, pulling him toward the ground. He gasped, his verses choking, yet still he recited. Omar's heart clenched. Uncle. Tariq's voice cracked but held. Strike, son. Strike before it takes us all. Omar turned to Layla. She lay sprawled on the dais, her body jerking violently. Her eyes flickered between brown and crimson, her lips whispering his name one moment, spewing curses the next. Her face twisted, half hers, half monstrous, as if two souls fought for the same vessel. Her hands clawed at the stone, her nails leaving bloody streaks. Omar, she gasped, soft and human. Please, save me. Then her mouth stretched too wide, her teeth sharp, her voice guttural. Break me, and you break her too. His grip on the hammer trembled. Tears blurred his sight. He stood at the edge of madness, every blow he struck might save her, or end her. But her plea burned in his chest. Her true voice. Omar, don't stop. He roared, lifting the hammer high. The jinn struck at him, its claw descending like a storm. He swung with all his strength. Hammer met shadow, sparks of light exploding. The shock threw him backward, but the fissure cracked deeper. The mansion howled. The floor split wide, marble shattering, beams collapsing. Portraits fell in showers of glass and dust. The air was thick with screams, of the brides, of the jinn, of the house itself. Omar pressed forward, staggering through the storm. He swung again, and again, each blow fueled by fury, by grief, by love. The fissure split open fully. A roar like the tearing of the earth itself erupted, shaking the ground. Black wind poured upward, carrying with it faces, forms, fragments of the brides the mansion had devoured. Layla screamed, her voice pure and human, her body convulsing. Omar. He dropped the hammer, dragging her into his arms. Dust and shadow whipped around them, choking him, burning his skin. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaking through the grime. "I've got you. I'll never let go." The jinn loomed over them, its form fractured, its claws lashing wildly. Its voice was thunder and flame. "You dare break my heart? Then I will write a new one in yours." Before Omar could move, the black wind surged downward. It struck him like fire, like ice, like knives piercing every vein. He screamed, his body convulsing. He clutched Layla tighter, shielding her, but the wind seeped through him, into him. He saw flashes, brides screaming, chains tightening, anklets shattering. He felt the weight of centuries, the hunger of the mansion, the jinn's endless thirst. It poured into him, binding, searing, burning. Layla's eyes widened in horror. "Omar, no," the jinn's laughter echoed in his skull. "Now you are mine too." Tariq broke free of the shadows with a final cry. His voice thundered, every verse of his heart pouring out at once. La ilaha illallahu Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Light flared, blinding. For a moment, the jinn recoiled, shrieking, its form unraveling. The chamber shook, the fissure cracking wider, beams collapsing in clouds of dust. But Omar felt it already. The jinn was inside him. Its claws were not on his body, but in his soul. His veins burned with its fire, his mind echoed with its voices. Layla clutched his face, her tears streaking down her cheeks. "Omar, fight it. Please." He gasped, his chest seizing, his vision flickering red. He felt the jinn's hunger surging, pressing against his love, his will, his faith. And he realized the truth. To save her, he would have to fight not just the mansion. Not just the jinn. But himself. The chamber cracked open above them. Moonlight poured through the roof as it split. Dust and debris rained. The jinn's roar shook the world, its laughter merging with the screams of the house. Omar's knees buckled, the hammer slipping from his grip. He clutched Layla tighter, his body convulsing, his vision crimson. Her lips pressed to his ear, her voice trembling. "Don't let it win. Even if you lose me, don't let it win." He sobbed, burying his face in her hair. "I can't lose you." The jinn's laughter filled his chest, his veins, his soul. "Yes you can." Sparkle's end of Chapter 11. Chapter 12, the last bargain installment. 1. The mansion was dying, or being born anew. The marble floor split with a scream, cracks racing outward like veins. Dust billowed from the ceiling as beams splintered and crashed. The chandeliers swayed violently before shattering, raining shards of glass across the chamber. The walls moaned, not with the creak of stone, but with the anguish of something alive. The fissure at the dais yawned wider, its black wind rising in a funnel, carrying the voices of the lost brides. Some sobbed, some wailed, some laughed madly. Their cries clung to the air like cobwebs, impossible to shake. Omar clutched Layla to his chest, his own body convulsing as fire and ice coursed through his veins. He could feel the jinn inside him now, not just outside. Its hunger clawed at his mind, its whispers slithering down his spine. "Why resist?" the voices crooned, overlapping. Bride's voices. Layla's voice. His own voice, twisted. "Let me in. You will not lose her, you will join her. Bride and groom, bound forever. One body. One flame. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaming. I will not give you either of us. For a heartbeat, her eyes were brown, wet with grief, human. Omar, she breathed, fragile as a child. Then the crimson flared. Her lips twisted into a grin too wide for her face. But you already have. Tariq stumbled through the wreckage, Quran clutched to his chest. His turban had unraveled, his beard glistened with sweat. His voice was hoarse but unrelenting, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal al-wakil. Allahu Akbar. The verses rang out, threads of light weaving briefly against the shadows. The relics swirling above, dupattas, anklets, bangles, faltered in their frenzy. But the fissure roared louder, black wind choking the words. Shadows lashed around Tariq's ankles, pulling him down. His knees struck marble with a crack, yet his voice rose even louder. Omar cried out, Uncle. Tariq's eyes burned with desperate fire. Strike, son. Before it takes us both. The jinn's laughter filled the chamber. The old man is a candle in a storm. When he dies, the house is mine again. Omar turned to Layla. She writhed in his arms, her body jerking, her limbs bending unnaturally as though invisible strings pulled her apart. Her face flickered, one moment her soft features, the next something monstrous, her jaw unhinged, her teeth sharp, her eyes pits of flame. Her voice fractured, Omar, please, let me go, Omar, break me, Omar, if you strike again, you kill her. Omar, if you stop, she is mine forever. His heart split. Every plea was hers, and not hers. Every word begged for his hand and cursed it. He glanced toward the hammer lying just beyond reach, its handle glinting faintly in the storm of dust. His hand twitched toward it. But fear froze him. If the jinn was truly bound to her, if their fates were one, then each blow might shatter her soul too. The mansion convulsed again. Through the choking dust, Omar saw visions, not memories, not dreams, but intrusions from the jinn. He saw his wedding night with Layla, her hands trembling as he lifted her veil, her shy smile, the scent of roses in her hair. But the vision twisted, her eyes bleeding crimson, her smile curving cruel. He saw the Lahore she had dreamed of, Anarkali Bazaar bustling with colors, kulfi melting in the summer sun, her laughter ringing. But in the vision, the bazaar burned, stalls collapsing, her laughter turning into screams. Each vision stabbed him with hope and despair at once. The jinn whispered inside him, these memories are mine now. Each one you love feeds me. Strike again, and you strike her. Strike her, and you strike yourself. He squeezed his eyes shut, tears scorching his cheeks. You will not have her. The laughter boomed. I already do. Tariq collapsed onto his side, coughing blood, his verses faltering. Still, his lips moved, his voice a ragged whisper, La ilaha illallahu, there is no God but Allah. The relics swarmed around him, slashing at his arms, binding him tighter. His Quran slipped from his grasp, sliding across the floor toward Omar. Omar lunged, seizing it with trembling hands. He pressed it to his chest, his blood smearing the cover. The jinn hissed. Words. Ink on paper. Do you think they save you here? My bargain is older than ink. Older than your prayers. Omar's chest heaved, his tears wetting the holy pages. His love for Layla burned, but his fear threatened to extinguish it. Then Layla stirred weakly. Her eyes flickered brown. She reached for his cheek with trembling fingers. Omar, her voice was human, soft. If you love me, don't let it win. He sobbed, pressing his face to her palm. Always. Always, I will love you. Her hand slipped away, her eyes blazing red again. Her laugh rattled his bones. Then strike, and bury her. The mansion roared. The fissure yawned wider, the floor splitting beneath them. Through the widening crack, Omar glimpsed something vast, a void with no bottom, flames and shadows twisting together, hands clawing upward. It was not hell as the mullahs described it, it was older, hungrier, nameless. The jinn's voice thundered, "Choose, Omar. Strike, and she dies with me. Spare her, and she is mine forever. Either way, your love feeds me." Omar's heart convulsed. He lifted the Quran with one hand, the hammer with the other. Sweat stung his eyes, blood dripped down his ribs. He pressed his lips to Layla's ear, whispering through his sobs. "I will not let you go. Not to it. Not to death. Not to silence. There must be another way." The jinn's laughter rattled his skull. "There is no other way. The bargain binds. The bargain always binds." The fissure flared, the black wind whipping upward, tearing at his clothes, searing his skin. Omar staggered to his feet, dragging Layla with him, the Quran pressed to his chest, the hammer raised. His knees shook, his chest burned, but his resolve solidified like iron. "I will not bargain. Not with you. Not with anyone." The chamber froze. For a breathless instant, the wind stopped, the relics halted, even the jinn faltered. Only his words remained. Layla's eyes flickered brown. She smiled faintly, fragile, human. "Omar," he raised the hammer high, tears streaming. And the mansion screamed. Sparkle's end of installment 1 chapter 12, the last bargain installment 2. The mansion howled like a beast torn open. Dust rained from the ceiling as beams cracked, walls split, and portraits exploded in showers of glass. The fissure spewed its black wind higher, pulling at clothes and hair, dragging at every breath. Omar staggered, clutching Layla to his chest. His body jerked violently as the jinn pressed deeper into him. He could feel it inside his veins now, coiling like fire. His heart pounded with a rhythm not his own, each beat echoing with laughter. "Why resist?" the voices whispered in his skull. "Brides, Layla," his own voice, all merging. "Join her. Be one. Your love is not a shield, it is my chain. It binds you to me." He fell to his knees, gasping, the hammer slipping from his hand. Layla writhed in his arms, her face flickering between human and monstrous. "Omar," she whispered, brown eyes glistening for a heartbeat. "Fight it," then crimson flared, her lips twisting. "Or feed it." Her nails raked his face, sharp enough to draw blood. His tears mixed with it as he clutched her tighter. Tariq crawled toward them through the wreckage, his body battered, his beard matted with blood and dust. He clutched the Quran still, his lips moving furiously. "La ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu, there is no God but Allah, alone, without partner. To him belongs the kingdom, and to him belongs all praise." The words shook with his weakness, yet they glowed faintly in the storm. The shadows hissed, recoiling as if stung. The jinn roared, its form towering, its claws smashing stone. "Old man, your book cannot unmake my hunger. Your tongue only reminds me of the silence you failed to keep." Shadows lashed at Tariq, wrapping his chest, dragging him back. He gasped, choking, yet still he recited. His eyes met Omar's across the chaos. "Son," he shouted hoarsely. "Faith is not bargaining. It is surrender to Allah, not to hunger. Do not surrender to this thing." Omar's chest heaved, his vision swimming red. "If I strike again, I kill her." Tariq's voice cracked, tears streaming. "Then strike with love, not rage." The fissure widened. From its depths rose more hands, skeletal and dripping shadow. They clawed upward, reaching for Omar, for Layla, for Tariq. Each hand bore faces etched into its bones, brides' faces, wide-eyed and weeping, some screaming, some smiling cruelly. They grabbed Omar's ankles, his wrists, his shoulders, pulling him toward the pit. He thrashed, roaring, trying to tear free, but the fire inside him betrayed him. His own arms moved against him, trembling, resisting his will. The jinn's voice filled his skull. See? You are already mine. Strike again, and you strike yourself. Spare her, and you live together in me. Bride and groom, eternal. Layla convulsed, screaming his name, then cursing it. Her voice fractured into dozens, a chorus of brides begging and damning him at once. Omar's soul split. He saw her as his wife, trembling with shy joy on their wedding night. He saw her as a monster, eyes glowing, mouth twisted. He saw her as both, and realized that in this moment, she was neither. She was only trapped. And so was he. The mansion convulsed again. A beam crashed behind them, splintering into dust. Moonlight poured through the shattered roof, slicing the chamber in cold silver. The wind whipped harder, dragging them toward the fissure. Omar clawed for the hammer, his fingers brushing its handle. The jinn's laughter thundered. Yes. Take it. Strike the dais, strike the bond. And as you do, know that your love shatters with it. Layla's eyes flickered brown once more. Her lips trembled. Omar. I trust you. His heart convulsed. He wanted to believe that was her true voice, not another mask. But what if it was both? He clutched the hammer, staggering to his feet. The Quran pressed against his chest with his other arm, its weight both grounding and unbearable. Layla writhed against him, half bride, half beast. The jinn's claws loomed above, its form towering until it filled the chamber. Choose, it roared. Strike and bury her. Spare her and join her. Choose, Omar, choose. Tariq's voice rose, breaking into a final cry. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Light flared briefly, but his body collapsed to the floor. He lay still, blood seeping into the dust. Omar's chest shattered with grief. His uncle had given everything, his faith spilling into the chamber until his breath failed. And now Omar stood alone. The hammer shook in his grip. The fissure howled. Layla clutched him weakly, her eyes brown and soft for one last flicker. Omar, she whispered, fragile as glass. Don't stop now. Then her lips twisted, her voice guttural. Or stop forever. The wind shrieked, the chamber cracked, the jinn's laughter shook the sky. And Omar raised the hammer high, torn between love, faith, and ruin. Sparkle's end of Chapter 12, Installment 2 Word Count, 1, 350 words Chapter 12, The Last Bargain Installment 3 The hammer shook in Omar's grip, its handle slick with his blood. The fissure shrieked, the mansion convulsed, the jinn loomed with claws spread wide. Choose, it roared, its voice filling every corner, every vein. Strike and bury her. Spare her and be mine forever. Layla writhed in his arms. Her eyes flickered brown, wet with tears. Omar, please. Then crimson burned, her lips twisted. Do it. Destroy us both. His chest shattered with grief. He lifted the hammer high, his arms trembling. For an instant, the world slowed. He saw everything at once, the mansion collapsing, the relics swirling, Tariq's body crumpled, Layla's soul flickering. And he saw himself. A groom with no bride, a man with no choice. He roared, bringing the hammer down. The blow cracked the dais to its core. Stone split, the fissure yawning wide. A scream tore through the chamber, not one voice, but thousands, the chorus of every bride the mansion had devoured. The black wind erupted upward, shaking the walls, ripping the roof open. The jinn shrieked, its form unraveling, faces flickering too fast to see. Its claws lashed wildly, gouging stone, tearing beams. Its laughter broke into rage. You think you destroy me? I am not stone. I am not fire. I am you. The wind struck Omar full force, burning, freezing, tearing. He screamed, his body convulsing. The jinn poured into him, binding, searing, carving its hunger into his veins. Layla clutched his face, her tears streaming. Omar, fight it. His vision blurred red, his chest convulsed. He felt the jinn inside him, its voice purring in his mind. Yes. Fight. Or surrender. Either way, I remain. The mansion collapsed around them. Walls fell, beams splintered, dust choked the air. Portraits shattered, relics burned, dupatas turned to ash. The house that had fed on brides for centuries was crumbling under the weight of its own hunger. Tariq stirred faintly, his voice no louder than breath. "Oh God, protect them," his hand twitched toward his Quran, then stilled. Omar staggered, clutching Layla, the hammer fallen from his grip. His body burned with fire not his own, his veins alive with shadows. But his heart still beat for her. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering through his tears. "I will not let you go. Not to it. Not to death. Not to silence." Her eyes flickered brown, her lips trembling. "Then don't stop now." The fisher shrieked, the jinn howled, the mansion moaned its death throes. Omar drew the last of his strength, his love, his faith. He pressed his lips to hers, their tears mingling, their bodies trembling. And he chose. The hammer fell one final time. The dais shattered into dust. The fisher roared, then imploded, sucking the black wind back into itself. Brides' voices wailed, fading into silence. The jinn screamed, its laughter breaking, its form unraveling into a storm of ash. The mansion convulsed, its arches collapsing, its corridors caving. The roof tore open, moonlight flooding the ruins. Omar fell to his knees, clutching Layla. The world shook, then stilled. Dust settled. Silence fell. For a heartbeat, it seemed over. Then Layla stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, brown and human. She touched his cheek weakly, her smile fragile, pure. "Omar," she whispered. "You saved me." His tears fell freely. He pressed her hand to his lips. "Always." She leaned into him, her body trembling, her breath shallow but hers. For a moment, hope flickered. Then his chest convulsed. His vision blurred crimson. His veins burned. His mouth opened, and laughter not his own spilled out. Layla's eyes widened in horror. The jinn's voice purred from his lips. "Yes. You saved her. And in doing so, you bound me to you." Omar's tears mixed with blood. He clutched Layla tighter, his body racked with fire. His voice broke between his own and the jinn's. "I will never let you win." The jinn laughed softly. "We will see." The mansion lay in ruins. Tariq's body was still. The portraits were dust. The fisher was gone. But in the silence that followed, only two sounds remained. Layla's sobs. And Omar's laughter, half his, half not. Sparkle's end of chapter 12 epilogue, ashes of silence. The mansion was gone. Where once it had loomed over the village like a dark sentinel, only ruins remained, shattered marble, splintered beams, a courtyard choked with weeds. Children dared each other to step inside, but even the bravest never lingered. The air carried a chill, as though the stones still remembered. The villagers spoke of that night in whispers. Some said the earth shook as if Allah himself struck down the house. Others claimed they saw black smoke rise and vanish into the sky. None dared speak of the cries that echoed, cries of brides long dead, carried on the wind before silence swallowed them. No one rebuilt. The land remained barren, cursed. Layla lived. She awoke days later in a neighboring home, her body weak, her mind clouded. She remembered only fragments, Omar's arms, Tariq's voice, the mansion's screams. She bore no crimson in her eyes, no twisting in her voice. The villagers called it a miracle. But she carried scars invisible. She woke some nights gasping, hearing anklets in the dark. She recoiled from mirrors, fearing another face might peer back. She whispered Omar's name like a prayer, even when he sat beside her. For Omar did return. At first, he seemed unchanged. He smiled faintly, he held her hand, he whispered promises. But in his eyes, she sometimes saw flickers of crimson. When his laughter came, it echoed strangely, layered. When he prayed, his voice shook as though something else prayed with him. She asked him once, trembling, "Did we win?" He pressed his forehead to hers, his tears hot. "You are free. That is all that matters." She wanted to believe. She tried. But when he slept beside her, sometimes his breath came in strange rhythms, too deep, too old, as though another lay there with him. Tariq did not survive. His Quran was found amid the rubble, its pages torn but intact. Layla kept it near, her trembling hands tracing its cover. In the quiet of night, she heard his voice reciting, steady and fierce, and clung to it like an anchor. Months passed. Life returned to the village. Weddings were celebrated again, though never at night, and never with anklets. Brides no longer wore red veils, the color was whispered to draw shadows. And Omar walked among them still, a husband, a man, a protector. Yet wherever he went, silence followed. Dogs whimpered, children stared, elders crossed themselves. Some nights, Layla awoke to find him standing outside, staring at the ruins of the mansion. His lips moved, whispering words she could not hear. When she touched his shoulder, he smiled faintly, as though nothing had passed. But his eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. The villagers said the mansion's curse had ended. Layla knew better. It had not ended. It had only changed its vessel. And in her heart, she prayed, not for herself, but for Omar. For the man she loved, and for the shadows that now lived within him. Because one day, she feared, he might no longer be able to tell the difference. And neither would she. Sparkle's end of epilogue.